Good. All right. What's up, Chase? Thanks for coming.
No, thanks for having me, Kyle. But what I was, what we were talking about just before kind of hitting record was, out of all the CrossFit gyms that I've been to here in Austin, and I've only been here for, call it 2 years now or so, y'all's programming here, y'all's kind of mindset on movement mechanics, on how does what I'm doing in the gym translate into real life, that actually gets talked about here. That actually gets placed in front of people instead of, hey, we're going to do the workouts, good job, hurrah, and then after the fact the coaches go, oh, I think that'll really help XYZ person, instead of putting it in front of people and going, hey, it's awesome that we're hitting some clean and jerk, we're hitting some kipping style pull-ups, but here's what it actually is for, instead of we're crushing workouts to crush workouts, which there's nothing wrong with that, but making sure that exercise just isn't the pure goal. It's, hey, exercise so that you can do the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And if CrossFit and exercising is the thing that you want to do, amazing, but there are probably a number of other things that you also want to do.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome. And we've heard it over and over again. The strongest person in the gym is not the best football player.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually dependent on, well, one, there's so many other skills that go into playing a sport.
Mm-hmm.
But also, a lot of, when we look at, I'll pick on football, but when we look at like how football players weight train,
mm-hmm.
they train like power lifters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like football and powerlifting are completely different sports.
Totally.
So there's so much going on out there that I feel like is out of context.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people are really quick to say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And it's like,
mm-hmm.
wait a minute, maybe it's all correct
mm-hmm.
for their context.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's not wrong, but it could be better this way for your context.
Totally. Well, in kind of that same light with the footballers, the powerlifting is awesome depending on what part of the season, right? If, we're in kind of that a little bit of the preseason, right out of the off-season kind of style, you're getting off of that kind of hypertrophy, just kind of start to bulk up mass. Okay, let's build that strength, but totally, like if you're in the season, kind of into that late preseason, mm-hmm. you should be starting to build that power, that explosiveness, because that's what football's all about, right? It's, hey, how fast can I get off the line? How hard can I hit that dude?
Yeah.
And hopefully pop the ball out or something like that. And so when, in that light then is, why are we training what we're training? And with that, what are your goals, right? And I think that and unfortunately when it comes to CrossFit, we kind of lose sight of the seasons, if you will, where it's, hey, we're crushing kind of not the same programming, right? They're different workouts, mm-hmm. but it's relatively power, strength, not super focused, but power and strength, and then some endurance. And it's that all year, every year. Go,
mm-hmm.
go. Instead of, okay, let's drop some of that endurance just for maybe a month or two, really work hard on that power and get those little gains, right? The hardest part when you're starting to work with like individuals that want to compete at those higher levels is the trade-offs, right? What are you planning on doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And part of it also comes down to is, instead of doing kind of this generalized preparatory physical fitness kind of stuff, that GPP work, getting time actually into whatever movement that you're doing. Dr. Kelly Surratt from Movement WOD just came out with a video just this morning.
He changed it from Mobility WOD to the Ready Stick.
The Ready Stick.
If somebody's looking for him.
You're right. Check him out. So he came out with a little video about talking about like tissue tolerance. I know that you just had a talk with Dr. Jared here with Hutchin Health Services.
Yeah.
Hutch Health.
Health Services.
His last name is Hutchins. His brand
is... Funny. That's exactly what I asked him right before. I was like, double check. I know your name is Hutchins, but it's Hutch Health Services. And he was like, yep. It was like, perfect.
Yes. So Hutch Health Services,
yeah.
DPT, awesome dude, talks about tissue tolerance. And so with Dr. Surratt, he was talking about in the CrossFit Games this year, one of the first events was like, I forget the distance, but it was it
was a really long swim. I forget the distance too. Swims with flippers, mm-hmm. and then a kayak.
Yes. And so many people were just burning out their tissues because they hadn't spent the time. They have these awesome engines, right? Mm-hmm. You have the strength and the endurance that you can go forever, but your skin has not had the time under tension of getting that rub. Mm-hmm. People on bikes, people running and whatnot, right? Sure, we hit, at most, I know here in our gym, we're hitting maybe a 2-mile max for most of the time just because we don't necessarily have a great outdoorsy kind of place to go run.
And we've programmed longer runs in the past, and we'll do those like out on the hike and bike trail or something.
Exactly.
But the comments we always get is like, why? I'm not paying you to come here and run.
Totally.
So it's like, okay, so we'll work in the running into the programming, and you won't come in and just go for a long run.
Absolutely.
99% of the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like, well, deal with it today, but.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and again, that it comes down to, you're totally right. Why would I pay and spend my workout and not in a sense
of something
like,
I can do on my own?
Exactly.
That's what we always hear. And then it's always, well, are you doing it?
Well, are you doing it? The accountability.
So that's why we try and do it as like almost a field trip. It's like, let's go somewhere cooler with a group, because this is something you won't do on your own.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, even when I was living in Denver, and they have a really beautiful trail that kind of goes through the center of town. It's the Cherry Creek Trail. It's like 15 miles or something like that. I got a dog, right? And it's like, I'll go out and do that kind of stuff. And it was always a struggle to like go out and run versus, okay, I know I have my membership at whatever box. I have to go and use that, right?
Yeah.
You have that kind of skin in the game in that sense versus like, I got my running shoes in the closet. They're sitting there.
Yeah.
They might have a little more dust than I want.
It's like, it's a degree too hot today. It's just too hot.
The heat index is not there. It's like 68 degrees. Yeah. It's the perfect temperature. You're like, I don't know if I can do it. But when it comes to things like running, all those kind of endurance style things, going back to, hey, we got to make sure that we are kind of programming what we ultimately want to do, but also keeping that seasonality of, hey, get away from the things that you've been constantly doing, because that's where you're going to grow.
Yeah.
Once you kind of get set in your ways of like, I have my 3 or 4 days of CrossFit, I maybe have a day of running, hopefully you have a day of rest. And so many people put off the rest portion of...
And even the best in the world, just long interview with Matt Frazier I just listened to, he takes an entire day to do nothing. And it's like, that's never the recommendation, is do nothing. But it's hard to argue with best in the world. But one entire day, sit on the couch, does absolutely nothing. Best powerlifters in the world, they're only in the gym, and this is, and I might be getting it wrong, but this is Westside Barbell powerlifters usually have 4 workout days a week, and they might have little things here and there, but there's like 4 primary. It's like, that's a lot of days off, and it's like the recovery aspect of it is just so huge. It's
so under utilized, and I think maybe that's a cultural thing, especially in the U.S., where it's
more is better.
More is better. Grind. If you're not hustling, you're not gaining ground. Which, I mean, we can even see that if you kind of telescope out, and you can see like when it comes to like our crops, our ability for our land to even repopulate. It's like we hammer it.
That's a great visual of you deplete the nutrients in the soil because something's grown out of it. If you're not putting anything back into it, there's only so much that's going to be able to grow out of this. And it goes back to what I was talking with Jared about, and exactly what you're talking about is tissue tolerance. And you do a workout, or let's just say you squat, and let's say there's two things that could happen. Maybe you're squatting with less than perfect technique, or you're squatting doing the best you can. Both of those are going to have an impact on your tolerance the next day and the day after. But one might have so if I'm squatting with a big overextended back, okay, my back extension tolerance might shoot way down for a long time. Where if I'm trying to squat with a neutral spine position, the tolerance is going to come down because I've used it, but that's where the recovery days come in, so you push it back up. But what CrossFitters are doing, they're always just pushing, and they're not understanding that when you push, that tolerance comes down, and it will skyrocket back up, but you got to give it time. And then through the technique, you won't bring it down too much.
You'll have a little bit less of that drop each time.
Exactly. So the days after, there's less risk because your tolerance is still higher, even though it's low.
Well, and the beauty, again, kind of to y'all's model, where it's really honing in on the technique. And thankfully, I think all of CrossFit in general has been learning from the past mistakes and the kind of dogma, or not dogma, that's not the right word, but the social perception of, oh, you're going to do CrossFit, like you're going to blow out in 5 or 6 weeks or maybe sooner, maybe a little bit later or something like that. But totally, it's back to that, okay, how much tissue tolerance do you have, whether we call it that or something else, right? How good is your form? Because how much of your physiological reserve do you have that you're pulling out from? Because you always have pain signals in your body. With my background in kind of neuroscience and all that, all your nerves are firing at all times, right? But what happens is your brain, your conscious brain, right? Your kind of cerebral cortex, the part that we actually can perceive and is in our conscious awareness, is but a fraction of all the information coming in. So you have all these aches and pains, quote unquote aches and pains, kind of coming up in through the body. And what happens is, as you kind of deplete your system, whether that's through physical stress, like what we're doing here in the gym, chemical stress, the chemicals from outside, let's say you're eating your awesome food but in plastic that you're microwaving, you're drinking your coffee in the coffee cup, and that plastic lid, you're having the heat melt it and put it right in, right?
I just had that realization.
Shame on you. No.
Our coffee maker broke, and I was like, awesome, I'm gonna get a new coffee maker, all stainless steel. Looked everywhere. Finally found one. So we got one, all beautiful. Stainless steel, automatic. It's a percolator. It was awesome. And then I was sitting there and I was so excited, and then I sit down and then pick this thing up, and it's like, God, I'm such an idiot. I'm so blind to what I'm blind about. Then I haven't done anything about it, which makes it even worse. But anyway, I'm working on it.
We're always working on it, right? But so, right, we got the physical, the chemical, the mental and emotional, right? Unfortunately, right, we have this idea of like, I'm gonna keep grinding, I'm gonna do all that, but then I also work my super stressful 9 to 5, or I'm starting a business, or my relationship with my significant other is a little rocky, so I'm gonna go, I gotta get away from this, which there is some merit to that. Get away from the situation, clear your head, get a good workout, because you do get those endorphins, you do get that kind of rush.
And there is a little bit, and I know where you're going with it, and I absolutely love it, and there is a little bit of, and it's hard to say, meditative aspect of being incredibly out of breath and doing something that's so hard, but it's the only thing you can think about. And if you let anything else come in, and it's hard and you're out of breath, it's like, that's where you don't have a chance. That's quit time. But there is something about when you are, making it look good, but really pushing it, there's no room for anything else. It's like, it's only breathing, it's only the strategy, it's only the tech, it's the only thing that can fit. And so sometimes you can come back mentally a little restored, but with all that stress building up, it's like, what you can actually handle shrinks so much.
So then you have these levels or different factors that are coming in, and you're chipping away at that physiological reserve, that kind of headway. So then all the background stuff that usually your brain is this super amazing computer, and unfortunately, computer isn't even the proper terminology. We just always think of what's the most like advanced thing that we can think of right now. Whatever that is, that's what the brain is. Like before, back in the days, they used to think of it as this really elaborate kind of telephone system, right? And now we know telephones aren't that complex. And we're going, okay, now it's a computer, right? And who knows what we'll think of it next, right? They're going to say AI, but it's like, we're the original. Anyways, so your brain basically has a number of different levels where you have a function, and then you have something on top of that inhibits it, and then something on top of that inhibits that. And right, so as you kind of get all the way up to the top level of our cerebral cortex, when you're pushing yourself on all these levels and you're having all this barrage, you no longer have the bandwidth to kind of handle all that, and that's where things start to percolate and kind of come up and through. We know there are so many people with all sorts of different injuries, whether we're talking rotator cuffs, whether we're talking low back disc herniations and whatnot. If your nervous system and your entire kind of human physiology is at a good spot where it can handle these things coming up, you're not going to feel any pain. You're not going to have these things kind of come up. And this was especially true in the beginning of CrossFit, when it was go, 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 go. Don't worry about form. We're going as fast as we can.
The CrossFit slop. And that's how some still teach it. It's like, intensity is king over everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we differ so much from a lot of people, but I think that's why we resonate so well with each other, because it's like, it's not competitive standards, it's personal standards of movement, and then you push it within that.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it like at the end of the workout, when you're fatigued, you're stressed, everything about it sucks, it feels terrible, that's when the easy way is to let your technique slip and just continue on. And the hard way is to hold yourself to that technique standard and push on.
Mm-hmm.
And it might make you go a hair slower, but like the difference isn't that much. If you're competing for time, it's going to matter. But most people are competing for time that shouldn't be competing for time. But like, I'm still crushed on the floor, can't get up off the floor, just absolutely dead, even though I might have taken 30 seconds more, but now I've honed those movement patterns under stress even more. It's not easier.
And you didn't drop into that physiological negative because you didn't burn yourself out. You weren't using these more postural muscles or these kind of fine-tuning muscles to just muscle it up, right? You're like, no, I'm gonna maintain that good form, slow myself down.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? And so all in that together, right? Knowing that we're going to see in this sport such a longevity game kind of pull up, but going all the way back to making sure that we're doing the things that we want to do and also doing these new kind of activities. I dropped into a class, another box around here, and they were doing kind of a little more strongman style stuff where they're doing kind of like the sandbag toss, or they called it a stone toss, right? I wasn't using official stones or anything like that.
Yeah.
But just the new movement patterns of doing that, the weights weren't necessarily heavy. I mean, I was throwing like an 80-pound sandbag or something like that, which again, I mean, doing clean and jerks and snatches and all that kind of stuff, 80 pounds is nothing.
Yeah.
But this
sandbag 80 pounds is very different than barbell 80 pounds.
Absolutely. But if you never touch that, right, you're like, what the hell is this? And I have a background in construction before getting into healthcare. And like knowing that the oddity of some of those different shapes of kind of grabbing stuff, it's not heavy. It's just weird to grab. How can you position yourself? How can you create stability and not grab the sheet of plywood and bend all the way over and smoke yourself out. I used to, before I started my own practice, I worked for a what I call corporate chiropractic. It wasn't chiropractic for like corporate businesses, but I call it the McDonald's of chiropractic, where basically we would see about 100 people a day in the office, and it was a bunch of people, right, that were kind of doing this, these repetitive style movements. And not that we don't see people that aren't healthy with that, but again, they have the physical stressors of doing manual labor style jobs, which again, there are plenty of people that are totally fine with that. There were all the chemical stressors, right? Knowing that the style of practice it was relatively cheaper to get in, right? So knowing that where that price range kind of falls within that community, more than likely they're not getting the best nutrition. There's probably a little bit more toxic pollutants, right? There was a great study on if you live within, I think it's been a while since I looked at the study, but it was like if you lived within 100 yards of any restaurant, right? Because of all the kind of carbon outputting off of the grills and all that kind of stuff, they saw increases of different chemical kind of tracers in the body, right? So knowing that a lot of not necessarily super affluent areas have all these, fast food restaurants, which again, you're getting the fast food, which we all know isn't great for us. But just even if you don't even eat any of that stuff,
just being near it,
you're getting that kind of toxicity in you. So, right, you're burning yourself up at work. You're not getting great nutrition and probably not resting that well. And then of course, there's just the fight or flight survival of kind of being in those situations. And we know if you're in fight or flight, right, there's the sympathetic versus parasympathetic, right? For those that don't remember or know, the parasympathetic is that kind of rest and digest. There's a lot more that goes into it that kind of gets glanced over, but in this context, right, that ability to rest and recharge, right, and build back up that kind of physiological negative space. If you're in kind of this survival fight or flight, and I'm kind of jumping all over the place, but it's so pervasive, the connectivity of all these things. We know with phones, vertical eye movements are driven by the same part of the brain that drives the fight or flight state. So if you're there, right, you've worked your super hard day, you've gotten your food in, you're like, okay, I'm gonna relax, right? I wanna get into parasympathetic mode. I start flicking my eyes up and down, up and down, up and down. That's gonna keep you in that sympathetic state for the entirety of your rest period. And then you've been looking at your phone, you try to go to bed. We know blue light totally messes up your sleep, right? So you get this cycle.
And real fast, that's pretty hilarious. That's the first time I've heard it, and that's really cool. I've also heard that the lateral movement is a de-stressor. And it's when you're kind of, and this is from the neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, but if you're like super hyper-focused and kind of addictive mode where the candy bar, the drug, I don't know, the article of clothing you want to buy, whatever is like the only thing you can think about, then his suggestion of one of the many things you can do is get up, go for a walk, because what that does is makes your eyes move laterally. It changes your focus from close to far and far to close and all of these things. And that has a huge impact on de-stressing. And it's why in like classical therapy, you'll see like the watch go back and forth. And it's because the therapist needed a way to get people to move their eyes laterally, and they couldn't do all of their sessions outside because of weather. So they came up with this. So it's like that thing that we've seen, it kind of looks like hypnosis. That's what people think of it. But I think it's cool that that came out of just trying to get people to move their eyes laterally. So it's cool that that could be a positive tool, and then accidentally moving it vertically could be this negative tool that you're accidentally doing to yourself.
Yeah, and Andrew Huberman, love that dude. He's like a hero to me. Just because, again, he's taking these really complex, and he works more on kind of drive and a little more of the like cognitive, hard to describe stuff, whereas myself, I'm more into sports performance, and with that, right, we got to know how to deregulate ourselves and all that kind of stuff, and how do we kind of position ourselves in space, right? Because if I'm positioning myself in a weird spot because I don't maybe necessarily know where gravity is, right? If I think gravity is here versus here, right, my snatch is going to be a little different, all that kind of stuff. But absolutely, right, when it's, hey, let's kind of get out of this focused in, right? We know convergence, right? When your eyes come together, that's triggered same spot in that mesencephalon. It's the top part of the brainstem, that fight or flight kind of center. Convergence stresses you out, right? Think of something coming at your face, right? What the hell, right? Versus divergence, right, which is what happens when we get outside and we look at the horizon, right? We have to take our cameras, right, and span them out so we can get a wider field of view. That's in the pons, right? That's where that parasympathetic zone is, right? One thing that I also like to say is like, okay, right, we're in bed, scrolling, right, trying to de-stress, knowing vertical versus horizontal, absolutely, right? What's one thing that we all know we should do before bed and never do that involves horizontal eye movements?
I don't know.
Read.
Oh, there we go.
Right? So as we're reading our books, right, that's one thing that's like, oh man, I feel so sleepy after I read, right? Now there is something to be said if your eyes, let's say you, there's accommodation, which is basically, can my eyes basically focus in on whatever's close versus far, right? Versus convergence is the actual eyes coming together. If you have issues with accommodation, right, and you have a little bit of blur, right, because one camera is focusing, let's say, here versus the other one's here, and they're like, oh, that difference, right? That can cause some mental fatigue and make you tired. But realistically, when we're reading and we're getting those side-to-side eye movements, that's firing into that parasympathetic nervous system. That's getting us to kind of relax and chill out. Hopefully we're reading a book that is, really stimulating to us, and we're not reading like my girlfriend, she reads a lot of women empowerment kind of stuff, and I'm gonna do it kind of stuff.
I have a hard time because I read a lot of self-help things, and I can't read at night because I get so fired up and excited that like I can't do it. It's like because I can't come back down from it. But my wife reads fiction. She's also a fiction writer, but she reads fiction, and so she loves reading at night, and it's just like read go to bed, unless the book's really good, and then she's into it. Yeah.
Yep.
And the other thing, we throw on our nerdy blue light blocking glasses. That way we're not exposed to blue light.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that kind of jumps into the whole kind of sleep hygiene talk, right? And if we're talking about trying to maximize the ability to get away from that physiological negative of, constantly burning yourself out, really focusing on getting proper sleep, absolutely great. So the blue light blocking, right? I have to talk to a lot of people about really eliminating all light in the rooms, right? I know
we go with the sun goes down. I'm just super annoying with it. I walk around, it's like lights are going off or they're at least getting dimmed. Glasses are on. And yeah, my wife makes fun of me because of how quickly I fall asleep most nights, not every night, but most nights. And I think it's just from that pre-sleep routine, thinking about going to sleep a few hours earlier and doing the light. We drop our temperature in the house because that's another signal. Like if we were cavemen living outside, it gets cooler at night, so it's another thing that signals us.
Unless you're here in Austin, right?
Yeah, then it's still
hot forever.
Yeah, it goes from 100 to 95.
Like, yes, perfect.
Actually, I came out this morning and it was cool. And I was like, have I just not been outside in the morning recently, or is today special? I don't know.
I think today was a little special. It was definitely way cooler. So, knock on wood.
Exactly.
Hopefully the seasons are a-changing.
Yeah. Because I like where this is going because it's, and I don't want to stop you from going down that road. Keep going. But it is within each of these, especially when we're talking about performance, it's like the better you get at just having habits and routines that are just what you do that support sleep. Now all of this extra stress caused by you not getting high quality enough sleep goes away. So now you have more room either from recovering from what you're doing, more room for dealing with stresses of life, or more capacity to handle workout load.
Yeah, one of the mantra isn't the right word, but we all have these kind of phrases that we know, like, oh, every time I hear it or I say it, it reigns so true for me. But one of the things, I'll just call it a mantra, it's not a mantra, is everything affects everything, right? So when talking to XYZ person, say, oh, how about this? They say, oh, well, that's not related to that. And unfortunately, it has everything to do with that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of unconscious kind of decoupling of a lot of different things where I have this part of my life that is completely separate from this part of my life that is completely separate from this part of my life. And the reality is, whether you know it or not, they're all connected in some way, shape, or form. Because let's say, kind of back to this, I sleep like shit because can we say shit? I don't know. Do we get bleeped? I don't know. Insert the bleep now. I slept terribly. Then I wake up, maybe because I wake up groggy, I don't get necessarily the best food intake because maybe I don't have time to make something for myself, or I just go...
Well, and when you don't get enough sleep, cortisol levels are higher, but your literal hunger hormones flip. So leptin and ghrelin tells you you're hungry, leptin tells you you're full. They literally get off whack opposite. So if you're underslept, you can literally go the whole day without feeling like you're hungry, regardless of how much food you eat, because you didn't sleep. So, and then you eat bad or eat too late in the night, and now your circadian rhythm and your body clocks are thrown off because your body thinks it's the next day because you ate too late. Then that impacts sleep. So a lot of these things, exactly, it's like, and all that affects exercise, and all that affects this. It's like, I love that because that's like the message I try and get out. And so when I do my momentum, like kind of lifestyle weight loss program with people, the reason it's not, let's focus on one thing at a time, is because if you're trying to focus on nutrition and you're not paying attention to exercise, sleep, non-exercise activity, these other stresses in your life, how hard, it's going to be so freaking, if you're starving all the time because you're not sleeping, how hard is that going to be? Man.
Well, and unfortunately, I try to do this with my patients as well, and what I've had to do over the years is really start to dial things back because I'm very much a little bit of the shiny things guy, with my backgrounds. I mean, got the neuroscience, got some sports performance. I also did a lot of functional medicine and immunology while in school, so my brain goes, hey, right, the kind of everything connects to everything. I think there's a beautiful balance between putting in front of, hey, we have to know the entire picture of you, right? To know, oh, let's say we're working sports performance, right? And okay, I'm trying to increase your sprint time or something like that, right? And all I do is hammer on that, but then I don't find out that, you've been dealing with your family, like both parents have cancer and blah, 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 blah. And also you're not getting the proper nutrition and all that kind of stuff. It's super hard to distribute all of your efforts onto all of those things. But as long as you can acknowledge those and bring those up to that conscious surface, because again, a lot of the things when it comes to individuals, right, whether it's consciously, I know that I have these problems, or unconsciously, they have it in the background. Like one of the unconscious things for me right now is my good old car. She's a little jalopy. She's a 2002 Jetta wagon with about 250,000 miles on it. And somebody dropped an air conditioner off the back of their truck the other day, and I ran over it.
No.
So like now my AC
250,000 miles. That's good. That's impressive.
She's going. But so the unconscious, every time I get in the car, like realistically, I could give a crap about what car I'm driving and all that kind of stuff. But every time I get in the car now, because now the fans on the radiators don't work, I have to worry about the heat of the car and making sure that it doesn't pop.
So you're kind of your cortisol, your fight or flight stress mode is always a little higher.
It's always a little.
It's why I stopped speeding. One, I got a speeding ticket and had to do defensive driving, and it took 10 hours. And it's like, I've got
and then some anger management.
You're and then anger management for it. It's like, I've got way too much time. I got too much cool stuff to do to spend 10 hours doing this. It's like, I'm never speeding again. But then what I noticed too is like, I'm always on cruise control. I'm not looking for cops. I'm not worried about anything. And I'm just driving.
Yep.
The other thing that helped, and it's on these same levels, is I read this book, Leadership and Self-Deception. It really just talks about how when you're working with people, it's really how you're viewing them. So if you're trying to help them, it doesn't matter what you're trying to do. If you're viewing them in the wrong way, none of it's going to resonate. And certain things that I give off makes you feel a certain way, then that makes me feel a certain way, and then we just kind of ping pong back and forth and explode. Versus when I see you as a human being and you're no more or less important than I am, among other things, it really helps. So I've noticed when I'm in traffic now, instead of like knowing that car needs to get over and just kind of being like that little asshole and just like making sure that like, if they had their blinker on, I'd let them in, but I know they're trying to get over and they don't, whatever. But I've calmed myself down by not speeding and just looking at like, look, all these people don't want to be in traffic either. Like my life's not more important than their life. Like
nobody's out here just trying to drive.
Exactly.
And I wonder how, unfortunately fortunately we live in the greatest time to be a human ever.
Exactly.
But the hustle and bustle, and maybe again this is just from our filter being here in America, right? There's probably plenty of other places where there is a little bit more of that leisure, but I think back to the time, and my grandpa tells me about this all the time, of just like, we would just go out and drive, and I was like, and I would say to myself, why in the hell would I ever just go out and drive? Because it's a stress-filled nightmare of all this traffic, and everybody's fighting each other. We all have to do defensive driving classes because everybody's road raging, and it's like, why would you ever have done that? And it's such a change of pace, and that almost goes into how society and how our kind of environment has changed over the years. Like one of the things, kind of going back to all the different stressors, one thing that I have to point out to a number of patients and even some coaching clients, right, is that we need to be supplementing with XYZ nutrition, because the fruits and vegetables that we have now, if you took a carrot from 50 years ago and you compared it to a carrot now, the nutrient profile is completely changed. And so, for those that used to go, I didn't have to take vitamins ever because I ate, a broccoli a day, right? Which, hey, if you're eating a broccoli a day, you're already doing better than like 80% of America. But they didn't necessarily need to really hone in and focus because there was less environmental pollution, so their livers didn't have to work as hard, their kidneys didn't have to work as hard.
Less processed foods.
But the foods just by themselves were more nutrient dense.
Yeah.
So it's this weird shift in life, which, life is always going to be shifting, right? It's not who's the biggest, fastest, strongest, it's who's the most adept at changing, right? How quick on the fly can you kind of change to your scenario?
Mm-hmm.
But being able to look back at that and wonder, how much different would it have been. And there probably were individuals back then that had this kind of mindset of this whole holistic style. But if we had that kind of nutrition now, if we had that kind of scenario now,
mm-hmm.
how much farther we would be in certain, aspects of our life. More than likely, we're still going to be humans. We're still going to fight. We're still going to have emotional conflict. Hopefully, though, we'd have less chemical conflict and maybe a little less physical conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But all in all, trying to figure out the best way to kind of support yourself through all those different things. One thing that I've actually been meaning to ask you, because especially since we live here in Austin, Texas, right? We do get a little more sun exposure than most.
If it depends what you're doing.
True.
A ton of people, especially time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, it's like 7:30, 8:30 when it gets dark.
Mm-hmm.
But we're coming up in a few weeks. Daylight savings time hits. Gets dark at like 5:30 p.m.
Yeah.
So people wake up, they go to the office.
Get in the box.
Maybe they're outside to walk to their car a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
But they get out at 5, 6 and it's dark.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and so with that, right, like, and I read this awesome study. There's a doctor, and this dude boggles my mind. His name is Dr. Alex Vasquez. He's a DC, so chiropractor, ND, naturopath, and MD. All three, like, I don't even understand how you have time to do all of those degrees. But he covered on one of his like little podcasty things a great study on vitamin D deficiency on all individuals, and it was like also accounting to like physicians, practitioners, because most practitioners, right, when it comes to individuals that they can study are coming from hospitals, so they're in the box as well. But you're upwards of like 80% deficiency in the entire population.
It's insane.
So I know you take vitamin D. Are there any other vitamins that like you 100% hone in on?
Yeah, and this is awesome because and it goes back to trying to get as many vitamins and minerals from your food, but you can't assume that you are, because everyone, not only is the food not as high quality as it should be when you're trying to do your best, it's just not going to be as good, but also you're going to be this way just in your preferences and what's easy for you and what you tend to do. So and I love your functional medicine background, because I've been lucky enough to be able to work with a functional medicine doctor.
It's a game changer.
Alex Carrasco, and she was just amazing. She was amazing. But it was awesome. One of the things we did was like, we took like 25 vials,
crazy.
Different vials. So it's like I passed out.
Keep going.
The funny thing too is we finished. So it's like I'm still convinced that I passed out and they kept going, because they were like, we got 3 left. Let's just get it in.
Dude, you got this.
But anyway, but it was awesome because then I had all the information, because I eat a lot of meat. I was vitamin B12 deficient, which comes from meat. So I supplement B12, but I never would have looked at my diet and thought, oh, he's going to be B12 deficient. It's like it had to be, you got to get the numbers. And then so I do magnesium, vitamin D3, B12 with folate.
Nice.
But then the other thing I've been seeing with vitamin D3 is everyone is so terrified of skin cancer. And it's like you have to
Don't even get me on this conversation.
And it's like you have to be aware of this. It's like you can't get sunburned, like especially a lot. Like you can't. But supplementing vitamin D3 and getting that is very different than the process of getting sunlight and your body going through the process to create vitamin D3. Because there's all sorts of other things that happen in that process. So the new recommendation that I've heard, and I like it a lot, and this comes from Rob Wolf, is, I think it comes from, I don't want to say who it's from. I think it's
Sorry, Rob.
Anyway, throwing him under the bus. But he's actually recommending tanning beds, and I know this is like, what? Tanning beds, but not to tan. So basically, sunlight comes into your cells, and if the UV, if it penetrates into the cell nucleus, then its protection mode is to darken the cell. But usually that's already kind of after, the UV lights hit the nucleus of the cell, which is like, that's damaging. So the actual tanning is a little bit damaging. So he recommends, it's usually like 2 minutes and everyone's different, light skin, dark skin, it'd be different. But the maximal dose that you can have daily without tanning is his recommendation to get vitamin D3.
Okay.
So I try and, especially going for walks and things, it's like I try and have my shirt off as much as possible.
You're just showing off, man.
Just showing off. But really just trying to get the vitamin D. And on those days, I'm not supplementing it. So if I don't know, like this morning, I took my D3 supplement. Because I'm just not sure what I'm going to end up doing today. And walking back and forth from the car just isn't going to be enough, I don't think. But on days where I know, I'm going to the lake, I'm on the hike and bike trail going for a long run, or doing this, I won't supplement it. I'll make sure I do as much with my shirt off. And then if I'm going to be at the lake for a long time, it's like that's where the sunscreen comes out. But I'm always trying to find what's the dose that doesn't, or minimally doesn't tan me, or if it does minimally, like doesn't burn me, so I can get as much natural as possible.
Well, and all of these are great points, and my brain always, because again I'm the kind of shiny guy and I'm very much a lateral thinker, where in school they used to call me Encyclopedia Chase, where somebody say something, I'd be like, connection, right? So when it comes to like the tanning and being outside, one rule of thumb that I like to use is, we know that, right, the sun has to be a certain intensity for you to kind of get that appropriate dose of UV light to kind of get the vitamin D to start being created in the skin. And so the rule of thumb I like to use, and I forget who I heard this from, but basically if your shadow is within your height, you're in the good, right? You're getting appropriate intensity of sun rays, right? So that's why that midday sun makes total sense, because your shadow is super short, sun's coming right down on you. But as we get later into the day, right, and that shadow starts to drag and drag and drag, it's not necessarily doing you any good in the sense of vitamin D exposure. Now, totally, as that light starts to change, right, that's the beauty of sunrises and sunsets, right, and where we're like, oh my god, it's so beautiful, right? It's that really red light. As the light rays go through the atmosphere and it slows it down, slows that wave, we get that red light. Makes us feel so good. So knowing and using that, absolutely, as we're outside. The unfortunate part about the whole using the sunscreen thing is that, right, vitamin D is super influential into our immune system, and you have cancer cells popping up every day of your life.
Like, right? We've got them right now.
I have cancer right now. But the real question we should be asking ourselves is, how comparable or how capable is my immune system to survey, see where the cancer cells are, right? And the immunology of cancer is pretty interesting, right? Basically, your immune system goes around and goes, hey, cell, you look a little funky. And most cells, if they're infected or they have cancer, they put out a little flag, a MHC2 receptor, and they go, hey, I have something wrong with me. You can probably kill me off, right? And so immune system goes up and goes, oh, hey, here's the flag. I'm going to place another flag on you so that another immune cell comes and gets rid of you, right? So you have a surveyor that kind of goes around, and then you have a guy that comes and marks you off, right, and gets rid of the cell. And vitamin D is super influential with that. And unfortunately, right, we go out into the sun, so we're getting the UV exposure, right, that can hit our nucleus and get those changes in the DNA that may cause cancer, may not, right? But we're getting rid of the vitamin D because that sunscreen isn't allowing that good UV exposure to hit the melanocytes and cause that chain reaction, right? And another thing too, is most commercial sunscreens, because of what they use for preservatives in there, have carcinogens in them, right? So you're kind of going, hey,
and your body absorbs things.
Yeah.
It's not just like you eat it, it goes in. It's like you're absorbing things.
You're absorbing everything all the time, right? So it turns into this whole, I like to look at ways to maximize, hey, if I know I'm going to be out in the sun and like it's going to be too much, right? I'll get my good sun exposure, right? Because I want that vitamin D.
Yeah.
And if not, right, I'm totally supplementing, whether that's kind of a daily 2,000 to 5,000 IUs, or the literature does support, about once a week at 10,000 to 15,000 IU. I have a liquid vitamin D, and so like once a week I just make sure I just do a whole dropper, and it's probably more than 15,000.
And when I saw that functional medicine doctor measuring D3 was part of the measurements, and so you can know. Like when you're doing that consistently, then you can know, oh, is this even getting me to the level? Oh, is this overdoing it a little bit too much? Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, we want to be around that 70 to 100,000, basically it's micrograms per deciliter, or that might be a slightly off. The metrics, whatever the metrics are, it's around 70 to 100, right, when you talk to your functional medicine doctor.
Yeah.
And
but then the normal ranges they give are way below that.
Oh, my Lord.
So like a regular, like I think the general recommendation, I'm making these numbers up, but I think it's 40 to 60.
Yeah, that is
like those
normal.
those aren't the numbers, but like those are the numbers on the chart, because mine came back and it gives you that little graph, and mine was at like 85, and so it looked like it's way above, but that's where you need your doctor to interpret results, and
totally
it's not up to you to look at your results. And she was super happy with where it was, and it's like, good, because that looks like it's way too high, but you're happy, I'm happy.
Yeah, and that's the difference between functional medicine and kind of traditional Western medicine, right? Traditional Western medicine, their job is to save your life. Anything outside of that is, right? And you noticed that if you went to your doctor in the past couple of years,
and
right?
save your life through medicine.
Yes. Yeah, right. Just, let's curb tail and, stop you from falling off the cliff.
And they're really good at saving your life through medicine.
Best in the world. That's, that's why we, we're able to kind of get these massive kind of breakthroughs in healthcare, right? There's something you said about hygiene, right? We do know, as we kind of cleaned up, we weren't throwing our literal shit in the streets from kind of medieval ages, and we started washing our hands. The whole washing your hands thing was more based off of like surgery and childbirth, and we've kind of adopted that from everywhere else. Germs are okay, right? We need to challenge our immune system, but
I think that's an important message for people too, especially with COVID going on. Is a lot of people already had the hand wash every 2 seconds of the day habit, and there's value to getting dirt on your hands and having that accidentally, like, don't eat dirt, but like having that stuff accidentally
eat dirt sometimes. That's okay too.
Yeah, there's building up. Yeah, it's so good to be exposed to different bacteria, different viruses at small loads, just these things. It builds up your immunity to these things.
Well, and so going back to the immunity thing, right? There was a great study that just came out from Korea. I don't know if you ever heard he's not a doctor, he's a master of clinical neuroscience, Mike Mutzel. He wrote The Belly Fat Effect, his channel High Intensity Health. He's really big on kind of going through the research and whatnot. And of course, because he's really big on kind of functional medicine practices, movement medicine practices, he's been kind of fighting the fight, if you will, on the whole COVID thing, on, making sure that we're doing what we can to kind of protect ourselves and not transmit is great. But what about, your blood sugar, right? Because we know if you have elevated blood sugar and you get COVID and you come into the hospital, your likelihood of having some sort of significant whatever goes way up, right?
The same with vitamin D. And that's a big thing is, again, I'm making up the numbers. I'm saying them as best as I remember them, but guarantee these numbers are wrong, but it was something like of critical cases, 95% were vitamin D deficient.
100%, yeah. And there's deficiency, there's insufficiency, there's ways to kind of break it up. Basically, anywhere from, and again, I may be messing the numbers up, but around that 15, right? So before, when we were talking optimal, 100 to 70, right? That's the optimal range. You were in there. That's why you're feeling great, right? Then you have your quote unquote normal, which normal doesn't necessarily mean optimal. It just means, hey, off of the sample size that we had, right? This is the center, and these are people that aren't dying, so hey, good for you, right?
Yeah.
There was that, let's call it 60 to 40,
Yeah.
right? And from kind of that 40 to 20 to 15, 20-ish range, that's where you're starting to get to insufficiency, right? And that's where the body goes, hey, we can get by, but some of the lesser uses for vitamin D, in which vitamin D is used in many, many different reactions, whether that's working with the musculoskeletal system, working with the nervous system, working with the immune system, right? There's this great kind of framework that I'm forgetting the doc who came up with it, but it's called Triage Theory, right? Where basically your body is smarter than you could ever be, right? It knows how to kind of triage and go, hey, I have X amount of, let's say, magnesium, right? And magnesium is used in 325 different reactions in the body. Out of those reactions, right, there is a hierarchy of, okay, this one, if I don't do it, I will die. And there's one down here, right, that is, if I don't do it, I don't recover as well, right? It's gonna go, hey, fulfill this one first. We fulfilled that one, next on the list, next on the list, next on the list, right? And so when we're in these kind of deficiency ranges, sure, or should I say insufficiency ranges, it's not like, oh, we're gonna instantly die or anything like that, but we're going into that space where, hey, our recovery is less, our ability to adapt is less, and it puts us at a higher likelihood if some new stressor, whether that's a physical stressor of, oh my God, I tried my first CrossFit class, or I needed to run from the tiger, or, this case, road rage or something like that, or I have an emotional stress, all these different kinds of stressors. If we don't have the sufficient amounts of cofactors, whether that's our vitamins and nutrients, all that kind of stuff, that's where that kind of triage breaks down. And so again, optimal on that vitamin D, 100 to 70, then we got the 60 to 40, normal. Insufficiency is that kind of 40 to 20, 15, and then below that, that's deficiency. And you're absolutely right. Individuals that were in that deficient range, lambs to slaughter.
Yeah.
Right? You're just getting decimated with that kind of stuff.
And it's hard because, and I don't know, maybe they have gone deeper into these things, but it's also hard to know what's caused by the vitamin D deficiency, or the lifestyle that causes vitamin D deficiency also includes processed foods and also isn't working out or tends to not do these things. And so how much of it is this or this or this? But it is, yeah.
Well, and so the study that Mike Mutzel went over, it was a study from South Korea. I was going to say North Korea. They're not putting out studies, or at least not that I know of.
Yeah. Or, how much trust are you going to put into it?
Right. Yeah. Praying to Kim Jong-un will give you maximum immunity. And so basically it was looking at exercise and vitamin D in the robustness of your natural killer cells, in which, for those that don't know, right, your natural killer cells are part of your innate immunity, right? And real quick on innate versus adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity is your antibodies and your T and B cells. Basically, think of them as like your Navy SEALs, where if your body's fighting something and it's not taken care of by the innate immune system, which we'll talk about in a second, the big dogs come out. And this is what gets kind of trained through vaccinations and all that kind of stuff, and exposures. That's where the memory for our immune system comes from, right? So the study was looking at our adaptive immune system, specifically the natural killer cells, and again, the innate immune system. The innate immune system is the one that's running at all times in the background, right? That includes our barriers, so like our skin and like the mucus that we produce, but also things like macrophages, phagocytes, natural killer cells, these different kind of immunological cells that kind of go around and they're constantly kind of surveying and scrubbing out stuff. They showed that the differences between age and sex, right? Men, barring exercise and activity and all that kind of stuff, needed a little more vitamin D controlled with exercise and whatnot, because if you're exercising, maybe you're going outside for the run, but maybe you might be inside on the treadmill, versus women needed a little more exercise than men did to kind of get the same levels of vitamin D. And what we can do is I can find that study and kind of put it in there and make little corrections just based off of the kind of nuances with that kind of study. And it kind of just kind of boils down to, right, everything affects everything, right? Let's say I'm not I'm low in vitamin D, but you're absolutely right. Is it because I'm eating garbage food? I'm inside all the time, right? All these things totally impact your ability to produce cells in our body that will keep us healthy, right? Those natural killer cells, those immune cells, all that kind of stuff. And also neurogenesis, right? We know if your nervous system, right, isn't stimulated enough with vision, right, we're not getting natural light, or we're not getting stimulation of having mechanoreceptors fire by gripping and pulling and doing all that kind of stuff, right? Your autonomic nervous system, basically the things that happen in the background all the time, right? That's your blood flow, that's your heart rate, respiratory, all that kind of stuff. If those aren't firing properly, right, you're going to be at a lower likelihood of being able to fight off any of these new kind of stressors that come in, right? Think back to your if you've kind of detrained off, right? You know that you have the muscle memory, like, oh, I can hit these super efficiently, but that autonomic nervous system, that capacity for your nervous system to influence your respiratory rate, your heart rate, the blood flow into your muscles and everything isn't going to be there. So you're going to fatigue out. You're going to hit that lactate threshold without having the ability to kind of flush it out. And so again, everything affects everything. Yeah. That's going to be the broken record. That'll just be the title of this thing. Everything affects everything, right?
And I think so many people are looking to exercise as this magic pill. And it sucks owning a gym, coaching at a gym, working with people. That time, it sucks that that's not the answer, but it's not the answer. No. It's like exercise without paying attention to these things. And so I think one of my biggest frustrations is that, but that's pretty easy to knock out of people. But it's also the competitors not willing to accept that. So it's the competitors who think of themselves as advanced, so they just work out harder and work out more. And it's like, if you're a real competitor, it's like, then you are going to really put the time into these things, because these aren't 1% gains. I know that's like the big thing. If you can find 20 things that give you a 1% gain, it's huge. It's like, that is. But no, these are like 30%. If you start sleeping, that's one of my favorite things, is almost every strongman, powerlifter, or coach that's at an extreme level that I've ever listened to, and not everyone, anyway. Yeah. You get it. What I like about them is they're very open about steroid use, because in their sports you're allowed to use it. Yeah. And all of them talk about the most important thing is sleep. And it's like, then it's steroids for them. And it's like, that should tell you something. Yeah. Like, if you're not focusing in on this stuff and you're trying to go hard in the gym because it's fun, because it is fun, or if you're trying to be a competitor and you're not sleeping, it's just like, and then it's all the other things too. Exposure to heat and cold is so good for you. It's so many things on the list of things you can do to improve your recovery and improve your ability in workouts, and people are just ignoring it. Yeah. And so I think this could be a good segue into what you specifically do in your office with people, because not only is this stuff affecting like performance and PRs and all these other things, but like tissue and joint health is huge. And it's like, I know all of my big tweaks, it's been a really long time, because I've changed my kind of training mindset. It's been a really long time since I've dealt with any like show-stopping injuries. Like, I've had nagging things that we talk about and you help me through, and I have protocols that help me with it. But so much of the lifestyle, and back when I was getting hurt, it was almost always after a bad night's sleep, and then injury. And it was just like, and it's not because sleeping bad is going to injure you. You're just losing your buffer zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're stressing yourself out in traffic, if you're allowing the things that you can control, just because there's always going to be things that come in, your body has to fight out, it's stressful. Workouts are stressful. There's always stress. But controlling it as much as you can control gives you the buffer zone.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I noticed is every time I got hurt, it was when my buffer zone was gone. And then it was like my body was like, nope, like not doing it anymore.
The straw that broke the camel's back in that scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, so ultimately in my practice, right, being a chiropractor by training, right, of course we do all kind of the soft tissue stuff. And a lot of...
Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
I just interrupt all the time. But I think it's important because I think some people listening don't understand what a chiropractor is. And I know a ton of people think chiropractor, 5 minutes, pop my back.
Yes.
I go to get my back cracked, and that's what a chiropractor is. Just, okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and so there is that aspect, right? Unfortunately, when it comes to chiropractors are like, again, medical doctors, right? You go up and say, like, I'm a doctor. Oh, can you help me with this? Oh, actually, I specialize in this, right? So there are plenty of chiropractors that are that kind of walk in, crack a back, walk out kind of a thing, right? That's the style of practice that I worked in when I was doing the corporate McDonald's style chiropractic, right? 100% not what I do here, right? There is a portion of getting tissue sensitivity to kind of chill out, right? Most chiropractors are known for the spine, right? Because that is the most complex kind of biomechanical bony structure that we have, right? It's a bunch of bones kind of stacked on top of each other.
And we're always, and I'm over here doing God knows what on camera right now, but yeah, because we're always messing with it.
Yeah. Well, but realistically, right, with my background, with the continuation of neuroscience, right, you get a lot of stimulation from your spine, right? And so my kind of focus when it comes to chiropractic medicine is, okay, we kind of talked about the kind of pain is always there kind of a thing, but your brain is able to kind of modulate it. When you are in that kind of pain state, we need to figure out ways to turn your brain back on or get those tissues to calm down, right? When I say brain, I'm talking the central nervous system, which includes your brain stem, and the spinal cord, right? A lot of people just think the spinal cord is just the cord that goes from the brain to nerves. And again, a lot of people have kind of misconceptions on what nerves are and all that kind of stuff, and we can get into that later. But realistically, we're trying to figure out, hey, how do we get our central nervous system to basically gate or block that pain signal from reaching conscious proprioception or conscious awareness, right? And a lot of that comes from things like proprioception, right? If we don't know where something is in space, right? A lot of people that have poor posture, they have no idea that they're even in poor posture. They are where they are, and they see in the mirror that they don't look like the fitness dude, and they're like, okay, well, maybe I need to go do the workouts that they do, without knowing that there is a lot of underlying stimulation that gets you to a point where you are in that good position, right? There's a way that I like to think of the nervous system, right? And this is where we bust out the handy dandy. Which one's the best one to write on?
I think here to here will work.
There
on
to there
camera
will work. Okay, fantastic, right?
Here, I'm gonna jump over to this side.
Switch me. Jump cut, right? So basically, if we talk about our nervous system, I'm gonna try to do the best writing I can.
You just have to fit the doctor stereotype and have terrible handwriting.
Just scribble all day, right? So nervous system, and we'll just put CNS, right, for our central nervous system. That's not even how you spell nervous, but that's okay. It's because I'm nervous. No. So when we're talking about the nervous system, right, we have inputs, right, and that is all of our senses, right, whether that's vestibular, vision, proprioception, right? The stretch of our muscles, right? We have tactile sensation, right? What am I touching? We have hearing. All of these things There's also Enteroception, right? The kind of feelings in our gut, right? When you eat some bad sushi or a really hot Indian dish, right? And you get that
undercooked beans.
Undercooked beans. Oh God.
That was the last one that got me, and it was. Oh.
Well, and it's crazy that actually, if you eat undercooked beans, there are basically compounds in the beans that are toxic to you. And there have been cases of people eating, like, I don't know why they would eat multiple cups of uncooked beans, because even a few uncooked beans.
I think it's because I didn't know. I would have done that. Alex was the one who told me, like, hey, maybe those beans that you're about to eat again are undercooked. And I was like, what? Beans?
Yeah, there's a great book called The Plant Paradox, if you've ever heard of it, where basically it talks about these leptins. I believe it's leptins.
Lectins.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lectins that basically are the plants trying to create something that gets predators to stop eating them.
Yeah, like thorns on cactus, but these are attack you when you eat them.
Exactly, right? Teach you, hey, never eat me again kind of a thing. But so the interoception is your body learning, oh, what is that feeling in here, right? So you have
keep going, I'm going to check on that.
Oh, you're good to go. We have all these different inputs, right? Those come in, and you have modulation, right? So that's basically in our central nervous system, whether we're talking in the brainstem, in the deeper parts of our cortex, whether that's the thalamus, the limbic system, all these kind of things that, you know, we hear the buzzwords about. These are kind of taking that input, modulating it, going, hey, what does that mean? What does that mean for my situation right now? Whether that's, okay, I'm in the car, I just heard a horn behind me. Okay, am I sitting in traffic? And it makes sense that somebody's just honking because they're an asshole. Or, oh, there's nothing else around me. Why did that honk? Let me check my surroundings, right? The modulation is putting the meaning, and then we have output.
So this is happening more in the body.
So this is
brain.
So all of it is your nervous system, right? Your nervous system is always taking in information. It's going, what do I do with that information, right? What's the meaning behind it? And then output is, what do I do about it, right? So in the sense, if we're talking posture, chiropractics, and all that kind of stuff, right? The inputs, right? We're thinking very much vestibular, proprioceptive, and some interoceptive, right? Where is my body in relation to gravity, right? If I think gravity's a little off, or a better way to kind of put it is, imagine that you're standing outside and there's a 50-mile-an-hour headwind, right? How are you going to position yourself to stay upright, right? You might stagger your feet a little bit, maybe even go into a split stance a little bit and lean into it. Now keep that exact same posture and flip that wind. Now the wind is 50 miles behind you, right? Are you going to be in an appropriate position to stabilize yourself? Answer's probably not, right? And the same thing can happen with our vestibular system. Your vestibular system basically tells you, where is gravity and how am I moving in relation to my world, right? And so if your vestibular system is a little off, you might posture yourself a little off. We see this in Parkinson's. A lot of people with Parkinson's, right? If we think about how they posture themselves, they have that really rounded forward body, and we know based off of its computerized posturography, basically you stand on a force plate and it goes, how do you hold yourself in space with your eyes open, with your eyes closed, on a foam pad, so basically you don't get information coming into your feet. So you're going, okay, based off of that, right? All this information shows us that people with Parkinson's actually think that they're falling backwards, right? So if I think I'm falling backwards, what am I naturally going to do? Pull myself forwards. So we can see that posture is based off of the information coming in, right? I think I'm falling backwards. What do I need to do? Round myself forward. Same thing with pain. If I hurt because I don't like extension because my tissues have lost the capability, right? What am I going to do? I'm going to round myself a little forward, right? And so in chiropractics, right, there are a lot of chiropractors. Realistically, chiropractic is all nervous system, right? Because what do, right? We take your body, we manipulate the muscles, the fascia, the joints, right? We don't manipulate the bones. The bones don't necessarily crack or pop or do anything like that. But we influence the input, which will then change the modulation, right? If I know where my spine is better in space, then I can have a better output, right? I can hold myself, oh, I didn't know I was in crappy Donald Duck position, right? With my butt sticking out, having way too much extension. I now know where a more neutral position is. I can have a better output, whether that relates to decreases in pain, right? Which everybody attributes chiropractors to. They just think that they're pain doctors, which isn't wrong. Performance, right? If I'm not in a good, stable position with my pelvis, I'm not able to generate power.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing a lot of people miss, is they look at technique as don't get hurt. And in my opinion, that's part of it for sure, but they need to look at technique as optimizing performance and taking the ceiling that your technique is having on you and bumping it up to here. And a lot of that is because I feel like people wait too long before they work with people like you. And because they wait till not only a nagging pain, they wait for catastrophe. And then they're in to see you, and they want you to fix them today.
Yes.
And it's like, man, even before any pain, you could have been helped. When you had the nagging pain, you could for sure have been helped. But now you've waited so long, and it's like, oh, there was so much opportunity. Because imagine, let's say that whole process takes a year and a half of no pain that you're ignoring and managing into catastrophe. If you went back a year and a half, had somebody look at you, figure out like, oh, here's something we can improve. Not only do you not have to go down that road, but now every single workout you did along that path has this improved technique. And so not only is that technique going to be ingrained in you better, but like your performance in every workout was this much better. So you're up here relative to this person who not only is not up here, but is now going to have to take a month of backing off dramatically because of taking down that road.
Yeah.
So like getting in front of people like your eyes early, or someone who's going to nitpick a little bit, and getting that stuff figured out early is like, it's not just avoid pain. It's just like, oh my God, supercharge what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and when it comes to, I try to keep people doing what they love to do as long as they can. And unfortunately, there are some people where we gotta back stuff off just because you're so far down the hole, or the movement that you're doing, we just can't figure out the proper way to let those tissues recover, right? We're going back to that whole recovery thing. The short way about it is we have to let our tissues recover sometimes. Well, every time, but there are some times where what's going on within our lives is too much, where, hey, maybe we do back off, and instead of 4 classes a week, we're hitting 2 classes a week, really focusing on whatever we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to kind of supercharging that performance, there's a great study, and I'll have to find it for the show notes. Basically, what they did is they had individuals. There were some individuals where they got a sham chiropractic adjustment, right? And the difference between like a chiropractic adjustment and like a manipulation that like a physical therapist would do, right, is a chiropractic adjustment is faster in a shorter kind of range, if you will, versus a physical therapist is going to go slower through the full range. I use both because they're both effective, and if you're freaked out about a really quick guy, hey.
And that's what I found is physical therapists and chiropractors more defines the schooling, but it doesn't define where they are. And when you find, you can get good and bad in both. Absolutely. And when you find that person that's truly just like curious and passionate about everything, is you find someone who does, it's just like in the gym, it's like we're not only doing things because CrossFit says this is what we do. It's like, no, we're looking at what are powerlifters doing, what are track and field athletes doing, what's everyone doing, what are they doing in Orange Theory? It's like if they're doing something that works, it's like I don't care if it's called CrossFit or not, it's like we're going to try it out and we're going to figure out best practices and have this kind of toolbox.
And that's evolution of thought and everything. And so kind of coming back to, there's sometimes that we got to back people off. And we need to put input into the system. And so back to that study, basically what they did is they had people that got sham adjustments, right, that weren't designed to necessarily do anything, but basically replicate, something might be happening to accommodate for a placebo. And then there are individuals that got chiropractic adjustments, right? And knowing that the chiropractic adjustment works off of proprioception, but also some nuance when it comes to the central nervous system, the vestibular nuclei is your main postural kind of nucleus, or another way for describing a nucleus is think of it as a mini computer that takes in inputs, modulates, and creates output. Your vestibular nucleus takes in vision, right? Where is the world around me? It takes in your inner ear, of course, your vestibular system, where is gravity and how am I moving within it? But it also takes proprioceptive inputs, right? If I'm sitting down and I need to get up and run, it's a lot different than if I'm already standing. It's different than if I'm laying down. It's different if, I'm laying on my side, right? All these different things kind of matter. So what they did was they delivered an adjustment, right? So we have this massive amount of input coming in, and then they had them do a specific rehab exercise. And then what they did was they basically had them do the exercise, and then they tested them on the movement, and they used basically a computer to watch them and go, okay, how clean and effective now is their movement? And how capable were they able to learn that movement just off of this one treatment? And what they did is they would do a controlled treatment, right, the sham, and then they would do the adjustment, and then they would flip them, right? So the same person got both kinds of things, and what they found was after an adjustment, right, after they got this massive input of barrage and kind of cleaning up this modulation, people were able to move more efficiently and learn the motion better, right? So what I recommend for a lot of my patients is, and there's this whole, should I get adjusted before, should I get adjusted after? Realistically, I explain it, would you want $50 right now or do you want $50 in 10 minutes? Doesn't necessarily matter. I would rather you just get the $50 in general.
Yeah.
And whichever way you can fit it into your life is how you fit it into your life,
yeah.
right? But if we can get that input, get that awareness of where our body is in space, and then do our movements and then do our kind of technique work and everything, that's the best. And that's where, when I'm working with Jared here, just because he's right here in office, right? Or working with any other PTs, movement therapists, any of that kind of stuff, right? Right after the adjustment or right after any sort of physical body work is a great time to work into those rehab exercises. And that's why I incorporate, if I don't have an awesome PT around, or if it's something relatively minor that, hey, let's just clean up this movement right then and there, we'll incorporate movements and go, hey, now that you know where your shoulder is in space better, let's start to cue in and start to actually incorporate those movements versus just, all right, you're adjusted.
Yeah,
have a good one.
You're good.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and I really love that. And it's what we see all the time. I'm trying to improve my overhead squat or my snatch or my overhead press, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then they go do mobility work on their shoulder or their ankle, whatever they're doing it on. Mm-hmm. And then they go home. Mm-hmm. And it's like, no, you got to train your body how to use
that new space.
Otherwise it's... Yeah, and we've seen it a lot as people go in and see a physical therapist or chiropractor. They come back, they're doing exercises. Not only they're doing it wrong, but even if they were doing it right, it's like, this isn't really an exercise. So it's like, go that extra step and let's tie it into moving your body with the focus on what are we actually doing in that position. And so many people want the lacrosse ball to fix them or the chiro to fix them. And it's like, they're your teammate. It's like, they're going to help you. They're going to do things to you that you can't do to yourself. They're going to teach you things that you'd never learn without them. But ultimately, like, you got to take ownership. It's like, you got to do it.
Jocko.
Yeah.
Ultimate ownership.
Yeah, there you go.
Or what?
Extreme ownership.
Extreme ownership.
Yeah. I'm obsessed with that book.
Yeah. It's great. It's great. And so, and we would run into this all the time while working for the McDonald's of chiropractic, if you will, where, they'd come in, that thing's back again. Yeah, you got to fix me. And realistically, kind of going back to this, right? This input creates a better kind of framework that your brain can inhibit that pain, right? So a lot of people use chiropractic as an expensive Advil. right? In which I would much rather you come and do chiropractic versus Advil.
Yeah, that's better than nothing.
It's better than nothing, but unfortunately though, there are plenty of people that they go to the chiropractor way too much, right? Knowing that we're teaching our tissues, everything is an input, everything is a teaching moment to your body. Your body's always trying to learn and adapt, right? And we see a lot of the times that, let's say an individual has, pain in their neck causing headaches, right? They start going to the chiropractor, the headaches go away. Now, maybe also on top of that, they sit at a computer all day with their neck poked out like this. They're not necessarily getting appropriate nutrition, right? We know things like CoQ10 and magnesium are amazing for headaches and migraines, right? So maybe they're not getting enough of that. They're staring too much in convergence, right? The muscles, the suboccipitals, right at the back of the head here, are ingrained into your eye movements. If you actually put your fingers there and dart your eyes around, you can actually feel just a tiny little bit of twitch kind of on each side, right? And so the idea is, if I'm in here in convergence, those muscles spasm up because, I might have to shift my body relatively quickly. So we have all these factors kind of building in, but now I'm just adjusting you, right? I'm taking this neck and forcing it into a position, right? Which gives us a massive barrage of input, which inhibits pain, awesome, right? But we haven't changed the other factors at all. So now it comes back, right? Which, sure, again, we get into that Advil scenario, but now my neck is becoming hypermobile because I'm throwing it into this position over and over and over. Now I have hypermobility in my neck. And what happens there is you have pain from, I think about almost like a bell curve, right? Where, right, we have hypo movement and we have hyper, right? If you move way too much.
Yeah, and I think this is so important because so many people think more flexibility, more.
Yeah. Well, and we're coaching a class yesterday, right? There was an individual doing overhead squats where their shoulder was all the way behind them and they're hitting the squat where their chest is dumping forward and they're like, yeah, I'm doing it great. Hey, I'd rather you have maybe a little more shoulder mobility. That should be the most mobile joint in the body. But if you're putting your arm all the way the hell back here with weight, you're gonna smoke yourself. You're gonna start to have some sort of issue. So realistically, with chiropractic, right, everybody comes in with this, and if not done properly, they end up coming here and they still have the same pain. But they don't realize that it's because they've went from a place of hypomobility, they're not getting enough input to drive the brain to inhibit pain, and now they have too much movement, right? And that excessive movement, you're not able to stabilize, you're not able to modulate all of that input, right? And you're dangling all over these places. The neck musculature has to become tighter, right? That causes pain as well, and that's where the unfortunate slogan of chiropractics is, once you start, you go forever, right? Absolutely. If your chiropractor isn't looking at stabilization, it's not looking at all the other things that we talked about today, nutrition, sleep, emotional stability, all that kind of stuff, it all matters. And that's the beauty about being able to work in private practice and work with the individuals that I work with. They're actually open to these kind of things versus, yeah, man, just come fix me, and then that's your job. Your job is just to do it, and I'll go with a little anecdotal story that there was this woman that had been there for a couple of years or something like that. And this was my first or second time seeing her. She comes in, I read her chart note and, go, hey, there's some exercises prescribed to you, how are those kind of going? And she just tells me, well, just do your job. Which that was one of the kind of straws that broke the camel's back, and I soon there quit after, because my job as a doctor, right, is to look at all these things and know that everything is connected to everything and go, hey, if you're not doing this, I can adjust you until your eyes roll back in your head.
It's a lifelong problem if you don't take ownership of it.
Absolutely. And so ultimately, kind of coming down to it, my thought when it comes to chiropractic and manual medicine, which is just one part of the entire picture that we work on, is based off of this kind of sensory input model, right? Then creating a good space for your brain, right? So, and that includes like the nutrition, that includes different ways of kind of working off this stimulation, right? Working versus, we'll call it parasympathetic versus sympathetic, right? All these different things to work on really good platform in which our brain can kind of operate off of to then get the output that we want, whether that's a decrease in pain. Hopefully after we get that decrease in pain though, okay, let's change movement patterns, let's change thought patterns, because a lot of the times people think that I'm gonna have this pain forever, or I'm never gonna be able to do this, which unfortunately that kind of gets pushed in the medical mindset sometimes because doctors don't want to set themselves up like, oh, this drug is going to take care of everything.
Yeah.
They're going to go, hey, more than likely, because you're not going to change your life, you're not going to improve your nutrition, you're not going to do any of this kind of stuff, you're going to stay in this position.
Yeah, keep doing what you're doing, this drug, with this drug, and you're good. And it's like, yeah, I find that unacceptable.
Absolutely. And so based off of all of that, right, trying to inform individuals that, hey, everything influences everything. We need to work on all these different inputs into our sensory system. So I work a lot with the vestibular system. We work with the visual system. We do some eye movement drills. We know that eye movements are associated with 90 to 100% of the brain, it's 80% direct wiring, 100% indirect wiring, where we have that secondary and tertiary kind of connections into our brain, because that's how we operate in the world, right? We're very visual beings, and if you're standing here versus you're standing here, right, that changes my entire life versus, all that kind of stuff in the moment. So we work off of eye movements, we work off of the vestibular system, we do manual therapy, and thankfully we have a great PT in the office that, for the bigger kind of stuff, I can push it out to him, but we also do exercises and stuff like that. But the main thing that I do is teach, right? Is because I can lead you to water, right? You can lead the horse to water, but you can't have them drink unless they understand and they know why, right? I can give you all the exercises, I can give you all the mobility drills, all the recommendations on nutrition, mindfulness, breathing, everything, right? But if you don't understand why that's important and the story that it integrates into your life, you'll never do it.
Yeah.
And so that's my first and foremost job, is to make sure that you know what's kind of going on so you can make a conscious decision. As long as you know you're eating is absolute garbage, know that, my squat XYZ thing, and you want to continue doing it, awesome, right? That's the beauty of human free will.
Yeah, you get to do whatever you want to do.
You can do whatever you want to do, but I don't want it to be from a point of ignorance and go, I had no idea that gluten was making my stomach upset, which makes my brain upset, which then that's why I have all these emotional issues, right? Oh, I had no idea because my arch falls in, I'm having this knee issue that causes this hip issue that causes this low back issue, right? All of these things are connected, and as soon as people know why, they'll do any and all exercises, because people want to get better. Nobody wants to live the crap life, what I mean? So that's the short and long of kind of what we do at Action Potential.
Yeah, dude, that's awesome. Let me check, because I bet we're
hitting the top.
It.
But yeah, so I was listening to a podcast, and I'll have to find we'll pull up the actual presentation from NSCA keynote speaking event. I think it was a couple of years ago. But basically is talking about the somatosensory system, basically your ability to input and get information coming in. That's how we basically figure out what the best motor output is, right? If I'm on my toes, it's a way different movement than if I'm on my heels, right? It's the same idea of me trying to grab your coffee cup with my hand here versus my hand here, right? Different motor patterns based off of where my body is in space. And so there's the external world, our exteroceptive. We have our interoceptive, again, like our proprioception, how much stretch do I have? And that fascial system, right, where we're talking about Thomas Myers, that's the connecting point where we have the outside world, mechanoreception, right, the touch sensation, the fascia, and then that fascia binds around our muscles, in which our muscles have these things called Golgi tendon apparatuses, and then our muscle spindles, and that kind of tells us, hey, what's the tension on a muscle, right? And what's the stretch of that muscle?
Yeah.
And so all those kind of together, that gives us kind of our motor output of, hey, do I need to take my arm down, I need to contract the lat, stabilize the shoulder, and then reach out, or do I need to contract the deltoid to bring the arm up, right? And all this kind of stuff.
And it's our bodies are smart. So just because it's the way you do it, it's like a lot of times you can improve the way you do it because it's the way you do it because it's the way your body's figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
But with so much science and so many practitioners and so many people in the gyms, it's like we've kind of found the best place to try to start. Doesn't mean everyone's going to be the same,
Mm-hmm.
but we know that if you do this, that's probably not as effective as if you do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where the cueing into those positions can really, really help.
Mm-hmm.
But another thing I wanted to touch on with this stuff is, because I think it's a big misconception of people here, oh, we're making your nervous system just react differently.
Mm-hmm.
But what I think people think they're doing when they're stretching and when they're foam rolling and using a lacrosse ball, is I think people are thinking that they're lengthening muscle fibers.
Mm-hmm.
And, oh, my hamstrings are short.
Mm-hmm.
And because my hamstrings are short, I need to lengthen my hamstrings. And I do it from foam rolling and smashing and then stretching because I'm lengthening muscle fibers. So maybe you want to chat about that a little bit.
And unfortunately, right, we want to think in this very linear, I can do this one thing and that affects the other, right? In the case of hamstrings, right, we know most people, right, one, your hamstrings are designed to be tight. Like it's a rigging system, right? Just like there are cables for our suspension bridges, it's the same idea with these the hamstring is mostly tendon than anything. So you don't want to go in there and rip this tendon apart, right? Sure, we want to take, if let's say we have injured our hamstring in the past, and anytime that we have kind of scar tissue, right? A lot of people say, I gotta break up the scar tissue. Scar tissue is just collagen, right? And that scar tissue just is all sorts of garbly-gook. It's all over the place kind of a thing. And what we do if we're doing fascial manipulation or stretching or foam rolling, we're trying to take those fibers and organize them, get them in a more linear fashion, because if they're linear, they can then handle way more tension in that one position, whereas like scar tissue, again, can handle tension in all different directions, but not nearly as much as if they were organized, right?
Yeah, and you can kind of feel that, like if I am doing something, sometimes it like feels like I've got a lump and I just like lump over it, but then the more I kind of work on it, it ends up same motions just get smoother to do, and it feels different as far as like, I don't think like uncomfortable, like comfort feels different. It's not like as painful, but also you can just feel it's like it's not like falling off. It's not like this just lump. It's like, oh, now it's like individual things that are able to move around a little bit better. So maybe it's just organized a little better. Yeah,
and so when we know about kind of muscle knots, right? It's not like there's a literal knot in the tissue or anything like that. The whole muscle tightness, knots, and all that kind of stuff. Travell, great researcher, kind of showing, hey, what are some things that we can kind of do to kind of get those relaxed? That's where like the pressure point therapy, that all kind of comes from. Whether you're doing, long sustained, there's two kind of camps that think about this. There's like hold it for 60 seconds and pray to God that you don't pass out kind of groups. There is more of a, hey, we're gonna go 6 seconds on, 6 seconds off, and just kind of work through it that way. But we know that these knots, right, have two kind of implications. One, they're what we in the neuroscience world called a focal, small area, dystonia. Dys meaning dysfunction, and tonia is kind of tone or movement, right? So we're having this area where the brain, right, because your brain controls everything, even your immune system, even your, all these different systems. Your brain isn't able to kind of operate that properly, right? And so when you get in there, let's say you have that knot in your tricep, right? And you're rolling over it, right? You're totally working on that fascial system. You're getting that to kind of organize itself a little better. But also too, right? We're putting input in. Input. This is where my tricep is in space. This is how much length I have it in. okay, is the amount of tone that I have, right, that knot, is that appropriate for the actual position it's in, right? We know that as soon as we kind of rip out those kind of muscle knots, people have way more range of motion and they can perceive the amount of stretch way better than they did before, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not that, 5 minutes of me beating up your tissue is probably going to have anywhere from, under 10% input and 10% change on the actual structural cytoskeleton organization of the fascia, of the muscles. Mm-hmm. But it's going to have a massive impact on that nervous system and how it's perceiving its environment.
Yeah, so that way when it's stretching, your brain's not telling you, protect, keep it tight. Mm-hmm. It's allowing you to be like, oh, it's okay to allow this thing to move.
Absolutely. And so going back to our hamstrings, right? Your body basically has a governor at all times. Never injure your nervous system, right? Because think of it back in the day, before we had our awesome medical system that could take care of us, right? Let's say hunter-gatherer, we're out on the hunt, and let's say we get an animal and we got to bring it back to the tribe, right? And we go to deadlift this horse of an animal, you know what I mean? Without, I got it, I'm the big old alpha, and I herniate a disc because of improper movement patterns. That being said, I don't know if there are any studies looking at movement patterns in indigenous peoples, because realistically, like we know with babies, their movement patterns are perfect. Mm-hmm. They have not been taught the terrible ways that adults.
It is amazing to watch 2-3-year-old squat, deadlift, play with toys, and it's just like
beautiful.
It's so good. Mm-hmm. It's so good.
That's the whole mindset of dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, DNS, if you've heard of that. The Prague School, amazing stuff. But so right, there's this governor where your body's never trying to injure your nervous system. So back to the whole, we deadlift the horse, right? Herniated disc. Let's say that disc is then either irritating or actually encroaching on our nerve roots or any of that, and now we have decreased output in some of our musculoskeletal system, right? We know that like if you had like sciatica or anything like that, in which sciatica is kind of like a garbage can term of any sort of pain kind of going down from the low back into the glute, back of the leg, hamstring, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But let's say you have that pain now and you have that decreased output in your leg musculature, right? Sucks, right? Pain is life, right? The Buddha said it best, right? Life is suffering. But you're out there now, maybe you're not necessarily on the hunt, but you're out picking berries, right? Mm-hmm. And here comes the jaguar, right? Now I have a decreased output. I'm tiger food, or jaguar food in this case, right? So your nervous system is always going to keep you from doing things that's going to irreparably mess yourself up, right? So with hamstrings, right, one drill that I like to do is, what we need to do is we need to organize our body so that we're stable. We know that our body's not going to hurt ourselves. And the really easy one is just a simple bending over and touching your toes, right? Mm-hmm. And you're probably nodding because you've maybe seen Starrett or a number of other people.
It's one of my favorite demos to give people to show them the importance of organizing your spine.
Absolutely. And for those that haven't done it, right, it's basically first time you just bend over and touch your toes, easy peasy, you're not even thinking about it, and you're just noticing how far did I go down. And then from there, the organizational factors are kind of threefold, right? We have the squeezing of the glutes that gets our pelvis in a really proper position, right? Your glutes are designed for you, no one else, right? So it's going to get you in a good spot. Then we're going to get really tight in the core, right? So now we have stabilization at the top. And then to stabilize at the hips, we're going to imagine taking our feet and screwing into the ground. So now we have really good stabilization in the hips, right? If this is our hip. Mm-hmm. And then stabilization in the spine. We're going to bend down and try to touch our toes again. And usually we get, a significant increase for no change. Yeah. We didn't do any stretching. We didn't do any of that stuff, right? And we just bent over, right? But that stabilization, right? That nervous system goes, hey, I'm not going to rip or stretch my epineurium, which is just, think of it as the fascial sheath around our nerves, right? I'm not going to injure any of that stuff, so now I'm going to let you go farther. Same thing kind of goes with some of the balance training that I do with some of the athletes is if you are not able to balance, right, you're not going to be able to exceed your limit, right? The easiest way that you can kind of key in on this is something like a sprint test, right? Your body, for most people, isn't going to allow you to sprint faster than you're able to stabilize, right? We do see this in some untrained individuals or detrained individuals where they just start for a sprint and their body doesn't know how to govern that and they just go down like a rock, right? But most of the time, your ability to vertically jump, your ability to explode and create power, whether that's with a snatch, clean and jerk, all these kind of things, if you don't have that balance, your body's not going to be like, oh yeah, just jump however high you want, and if you land, like maybe break, roll your ankles, and then again, your tiger food. And so working off of these kind of governing systems, creating stability and safety for that nervous system, right? You get massive gains in flexibility, in strength, power, all these kind of things that we're always looking for. And hey, how do I do that? It's like, know where you are in space better.
And people are always trying to try harder. And it's like sometimes the organization, again, raises that ceiling up. And now when you do try harder with the organization, it's like there's just so much more potential.
It's night and day. It's night and day. And like I was working with an individual last night. He was lucky enough that there was only one person in the coaching class. So it was basically a one-on-one, which was awesome, right? And so working off the interoceptive, right? How do I feel my proprioception, right? Simple cue to kind of get deeper in the overhead squat was, hey, imagine, right? If this is our pelvis with our spine coming up, imagine your pelvis literally separating out and creating space so you can keep a nice straight spine through there. Dropped him down an extra couple inches. As he was doing the snatch, his ankles were dropping in. Hey, let's think about keeping that tripod foot. So we have the ball of the big toe, the ball of the little toe, and the heel, the calcaneus. If you maintain, right, don't worry about, heels out or on the side of your foot or lift up the arch, right? Not thinking about any of that cueing there. Just stay in the middle of all three of those things, an extra inch, right? And so we didn't do any stretching. We didn't do any of the other stuff, but just focusing on the inputs, right? We were able to get better proprioceptive, where am I in space, giving us much stronger outputs. And he was like, everything felt way lighter. I was able to move farther. And so that's where the beauty of having really good coaches and really good movement specialists know, hey, how can we cue this person, whether that's an external cue, an internal cue, to kind of get them to figure out the movement themselves, right? Because realistically, people can watch things all day, but until they feel it, until they live it, it's not going to do anything.
And I love that. And there's so many, and then we talk about this all the time as we're both coaching classes, as we're coming up with, we call it the teach and practice. We're coming up with like, what's that common foundational thing that can span the class as someone can hyper focus on, and using the full foot or those 3 points of contact as the cue, because then you can feel it in the snatch, you can feel it in the clean, you can feel it in the deadlift, you can feel it in the push press. It's in everything. And it gives you that hyper focus that transfers as a skill, not to the snatch, even though it does. It transfers as a skill as a human being to be able to pay attention to where the power is, so then you can use it for everything. And I think that's where the real power is having the people, pushing people to think about those things, but also them accepting that it's not always an injury thing, even though we think setting up like this is going to be the thing that gives you the biggest buffer zone, but it's like, it's a performance thing, and not just for the snatch, it's for everything. If we can get you really good here, if we can get you really good here, then it's like, that can change every exercise.
Well, and so kind of rolling off of that, right? A lot of people, it's an either or battle with them, where it's like, well, I want to be safe, and maybe the next time is, I really want to go for it this time. And it's like, the safest thing that you can do is the thing that's going to make you the best anyways.
And that's what I love.
Yeah, and so working off of those fundamentals of creating torque off of the external generators, whether that's the shoulder or the hip, right? creating stability in the spine, right? Kind of going from the center out. There's one of my mentors, Dr. Glenn Zielinski of Northwest Functional Neurology. This dude, amazing, works with Canadian Olympic gymnasts and basketball players. He would always do this thing where, you know, he comes up and he's like a pretty quiet guy, pretty nonchalant. He has this moniker of clinical ambivalence, where he's like, you can listen to me or you can not listen to me. I don't give a fuck, right? Because he knows, and this dude's a whiz. But so he would go, okay, he'd grab his coffee cup and he'd lift it out here and he's like, what muscles did I just fire? And then, of course, we're in school, so we're like, oh, you're using your deltoid and your meh. He's like, sure, what else? And then, like, eventually people are just saying, like,
naming the entire body.
And he's like, absolutely, right? Because if I don't create stability, me lifting my arm up, if there's not stability here, right, my arm would just completely rip off my body. There's a study where they basically took like a cadaver spine and sat it upright, and they started putting weight on top. As soon as it hit 5 pounds, the spine completely crumbles and collapses. So if there's not this stability that's created based off of our inputs, right, of where is gravity, what am I holding on to, what is kind of inputting onto me right now, you're not going to have appropriate output. You're going to increase the likelihood of injury, all that kind of stuff, and you're not going to be able to perform as well, right?
Yeah.
And so really cueing in, and that's why one of my big focuses is kind of the feet, the hands, and kind of the face and eyes, right? Because those are the biggest inputs that we have into our nervous system, right? And so that's where kind of the whole coaching, like, oh, eyes up and all that kind of stuff, right? Your body follows where your eyes are. Gripping the bar, thinking about, hey, if we're grabbing the bar, thinking of ripping it in half, because I can say external rotation at the shoulder, and sure, once people feel it in their hand, then they know what it's about, but they have no idea what the hell external rotation is in the foot or in the hands. If we're thinking of the foot, if we're thinking of isometrics, because we know a nice solid foot, right, can create so much more power than a loosey-goosey foot, right? Working on that short foot exercise, okay, let's make you do it, make you feel it. We'll hit the foam or lacrosse ball on the bottom of the foot, get that brain to kind of wake up a little bit more. As soon as we get that sensory information in on all these kind of things, again, the vestibular work is a little bit more nuanced, a little harder, but all those kind of things, they input so dramatically on our ability to stay safe and create power.
Yeah.
And so that's why, again, that's kind of the focus of some of the stuff that we do at Action Potential. And so when it comes to that, though, one thing that also kind of does fall into the wayside is the non-physical or non-exercised based activity, right? Because everybody wants to go crush it at the gym, and then that's the gym, and everything else is whatever, right? And so, like, some of the things that we work on with feet, right, are super simple, like single leg stands whenever you're doing, again, your like things that are just kind of in the background, because if you can have that stability subconscious, right, because you've programmed it so much, you're going to be way better in the gym. So one thing that I love to give to people is, like, when you're brushing your teeth, and of course I always say try to do it with the opposite hand too, to kind of dual task yourself.
Yeah.
But just stand on that one foot, try to maintain that tri-plantar foot or that tripod foot. And you would think that it's relatively easy, but then you're getting to brushing your teeth and then you think about the one thing and you're like, oh, wait a minute, right? And so all these little things that we can kind of do, they're maybe not the 1%, right? But it's 1% every day kind of a thing, which equates to what, the 300 or 36 times better, whatever. What was that book? Who was talking about that? I think it is just called 1%.
Yeah, I know.
Atomic Habits, maybe. I think that was...
Oh, if it is Atomic Habits, this is hilarious because I'm literally reading it right now, but I'm only like 10 pages in.
Ah, there we go.
I've heard about it for so long.
It's great.
But I love what you said too, just to kind of add to it. And so many people look at, I have this deficit, so now I have to add this stuff into my training. And it's like, well, if you added stuff into your training for every deficit you had, you're going to be working out, you're going to be doing specialty exercises for an hour, and like, when are you going to work out? So I love the adding in, because it's exactly what I tell everybody, is like, brush your teeth, stay on one foot. You're already brushing your teeth. Leverage that time. When you put on your shoes, don't sit down to do it. Like, what I literally do is I go 1 foot, my shoes and socks are on the ground, and it's like, okay, one-legged deadlift, pick it up, stay balanced, put it on. And it's like, yeah, now I'm taking an extra 30 seconds to a minute to put on my shoes and socks every day. But that every single day, working on it, and then it's some days I get there and it's like, oh my gosh, and it's like, just cool your jets, just figure it out. And so every day is different, but over time it's incredible, not just on how my balance and stability, but how that transfers to my squat. And it's like my squat feels night and day different because I feel my feet better, because I have that stability dialed in a little bit more, especially through bigger ranges of motion and stuff like that. But I've seen a lot of people, it's like, oh, I need to work grip strength. So after class, I'm going to rice bag, I'm going to do all these grip exercises. Like, well, why don't you just not break your sets up as much in your workout? And it's like, now, yeah, your time's going to be a little slower, but you're going to test your grip more, and it's probably not going to be a worse workout. Your strategy will just probably be worse for time, but for training wise, it's probably going to be way better because now you're doing bigger sets instead of doing singles on deadlift or cleans or something. It's like, link those suckers together, test that grip out a little bit more, and just leverage the time you're already spending.
Yeah, and because, everybody, and this kind of goes back to the whole the competitor mindset, unfortunately, 99% of us are never going to compete, right? And of the
and if we're going to compete, it's local, it's serious, but we're not professionals. It's for fun.
Exactly. And so...
Or fun.
I'm having so much fun.
Yeah.
When it comes to the gym, and this is one thing that I try to say every single time in my classes, is that we're here to learn and grow. And so if a lift feels bad, why are you sacrificing yourself today for nothing, basically? Like, you're not Frazier, you're not Medeiros, at the games doing something for hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's like, this is a Tuesday, and you still have the rest of your week before whenever.
And I think what people don't realize is, we see it with new people a lot, and they just haven't built the consistency yet to realize that, like, look, when you've been working out for 10-20 years, what you did on Tuesday 12 years ago doesn't matter. It's the consistency. But also what people don't realize too is, if you back off on a day, usually it's because of these outside factors of stress, or maybe you worked out and you did a little bit too much, maybe you used a little bit too heavy of weight, maybe we chose the wrong body weight exercise or too many reps for you, we just crushed you a little bit too much. That's fine. Because we're going to get a bigger bounce if we can pull back and let you recover. So a lot of people look at that day of, if I don't push it as hard as I can today, but it's like, no, if you don't push it as hard as you can today, that means you're probably going to be able to push harder tomorrow than you would have if you were just try your best. And so, but then you have that hard balance of, well, don't let yourself get away with never pushing through something, but in the kind of longevity of it all, it's like, what you did 10 years ago on one day doesn't matter. And probably because you pulled back on that day and got your mind right and let your body recover a little bit more, probably you did more that week than you would have if you tried to put yourself deeper in a hole. And now your next 3 days are worse than they would have been if you just would have backed off right then. But if you back off every single day, then it's, are you sleeping? What's your nutrition like? What does your workout program look like? Maybe you're just not ready for it yet. And it's always that balance of work and recovery. We need to line these suckers up, and especially with competitors, as they go work, and they never match the recovery side of things.
Well, and it definitely, it comes to your training age as well, because I think once you kind of hit that 3, 4, 5 year mark, of course, hopefully that's been consistent, right? But maybe it does span, like, I know for myself, I had a year and a half, maybe 2 years of really solid, consistent training. It was more bodybuilding style while in undergrad, because every boy in undergrad going.
I think that's how most of us get started.
Absolutely.
That's how I got started. Is I am skinny fat, I used to play sports, but I haven't done much recently. Let's do some bodybuilding things because I want to look a certain way. And it's like, I think that's how most people start.
Absolutely. And so you get that, and then life kind of happened for me, like went to chiropractic school, which, I mean, there was movement style stuff, but it was way more on this kind of functional range, like, oh, I really want to work on squat depth. I really want to work on ability to keep the chest upright. All those kind of little things, never really kind of on that strength. And then just over the last year or two, right, again, kind of getting deep into, okay, you know, as I was training for the CSCS, Certified Strength and Conditioning Coach, right? Okay, we need to start working on actual progressions on, okay, what are we doing if we're doing powerlifting? What are we doing for Olympic style lifting? All that kind of stuff. And, you know, they all kind of go in together, right? A lot of great, and this is kind of going back to the beginning of all of this, right? When we were talking about football, right? You need bits of all of it, right? Because we know cross-sectional area of muscles is totally proportional to strength. Now, there's a point of diminishing returns, right? You're not going to get to the point, I mean, unless you're Ronnie Coleman, right? There's not going to be a point where, you know, you have unlimited muscle capacity in that sense. But having a little bit of that motor memory of hitting some of those bodybuilding style workouts, right? Getting the volume training in totally impacts your ability to hit some of those larger powerlifting style lifts or Olympic weightlifting lifts. And so kind of once you hit the point in your training age where you can actually tune in and go, you know what? I had a really big fight with my spouse or something like that. And maybe because of that, I didn't recover as well over the night. I was tossing and turning kind of a thing, right? We did mention the whole like need to get in a meditative space, and so hopefully that would be a positive of going and doing the workout. But if you're not recovered, right, knowing that the sun's gonna rise, whether whatever happens to me in here, the sun's gonna rise again. And so there's a great Jim Rohn quote where it's basically, you know, in 5 years you're gonna arrive. And whether or not you arrive in a destination that you plan and design versus something that you don't plan and design, right? You can go, okay, like in 5 years, sure, I'm gonna arrive, but for this next month, every day I'm gonna go work out. Smoke yourself out, get fed up with CrossFit or any whatever workout exercise that you're doing, and then you fall off the wagon, because for most people, exercise is kind of a keystone habit where if they exercise, then their nutrition's going to be a little bit better because they don't want to waste the workout they did. And then depending on when you do your workout, it's going to make you a little more tired. So you maybe get a little bit of a deeper night's rest, right? And so as soon as you start to lose one, right, you lose that footing in one spot, it just all kind of spirals down. I forget the specific passage name, but it's like, to he who has nothing, everything will be taken. To he who has everything, everything will be given, right? Success breeds success, and failure kind of breeds failure.
Yeah, it all snowballs on it itself.
Absolutely. And so it's hard to get the first win, but especially once you kind of realize that, hey, tomorrow's going to come regardless of what happens today. Let me just do what I need to do today to set myself up for tomorrow.
Yeah. And so something that helps me so much, and this is another Andrew Huberman thing, but the brain follows the body. So if you're always waiting for your brain to be ready, then you're going to miss out on doing a lot of things.
I'm not in the mood.
Yeah. And I always use the doing the dishes example. It's like I feel like doing the dishes is going to ruin my life. But it's like I've done the dishes a lot and my life has never been ruined. But as soon as I start, my brain gets on board and it's never as bad.
You just finish it out.
But what's worked really well for me with this this kind of workout motivation stuff, and I do it with a lot of my lifestyle habits, with how I eat, how I sleep, all of these things. If I do my 10 minutes of mobility every morning that I do, all of these things, I don't let myself make those decisions in the moment. What I tell everybody, it's kind of a joke, but in the moment, Kyle sucks. That guy is the worst. He never wants to do what's best for future Kyle. He just wants to do what he's feeling right now. So I try and limit what decisions in the moment Kyle gets to make, because he is never going to do dishes. But if I can get in the moment Kyle to do 1 minute of dishes, he's going to do them all and he's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So what I really work on is kind of pre-making these decisions, and I get really good at following through even when I don't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at like, what's the worst that's going to happen is if I do the dishes right now and I was wrong about doing them now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be annoyed. What's the best thing that happens? I do the dishes. Now I don't have this thing looming over me.
Mm-hmm.
So I do the same thing with working out. And my rule that's worked really, really well. So if I don't feel like working out, I'm going to go in and I'm going to warm up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to make my decision if I'm going to work out or not.
Mm.
So worst thing that happens is, I just did basically mobility exercises.
Mm-hmm.
I got some blood flow, great for me. And if I can't handle it from there, I'm out.
Hey, so be it.
But most of the time from there, brain follows the body. I'm like, yeah, I'm ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I'm having a hard time starting a workout, a lot of times that people get just anxiety about like, oh my God, I know this is going to be so hard. I know you have a hard time starting. So that's where it's like, well, I'm not going for time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going for, it's 5 rounds. I'm going for the first round. I don't care about my pacing. I don't care about anything. I'm just going to make reps look good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to go super conservative pacing. No pressure on anything.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, okay, most of the time, if I just warm up, I want to work out.
Mm-hmm.
But if I don't, then it's like, just do the first round. And if you want to quit, then quit.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is almost every single time, it's like when I start a workout, slow with pauses, no pressure, round 2 comes in and it's like, it's time to go. It's like, I've already gotten this far.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's just finishing it out. And I'd say about 1 time out of 30 when I have to use these strategies, I do quit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and that's fine.
Yeah.
That means I wasn't there that day. Okay, I warmed up. It's just like, I can't handle life right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not like, anyway. It's like, I need me time. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I just can't do it. But 29 out of 30 times, I was misreading where I actually was,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a huge benefit
Mm-hmm.
of doing it. So just little things like that have really helped me stay consistent, but also knowing that like if I would have gone off of my feeling beforehand, that would be 30 times I didn't do anything.
Yep.
And then the reality is 1 time I didn't want to do anything. I just didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting into the flow of things. So just get in the routine of like, just start.
Mm-hmm.
And you can quit. You can always quit in the middle of starting, like,
Yeah.
fine. But once it's like, I always just have a different perspective. Once I start, it's like, it just feels different. Like warming up sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And once you're warmed up, it's just like, I'm ready to like do anything. I'm good.
Well, and so, you know, kind of like a neuroscience background, because I think there's a lot of people that know a lot of truth,
Mm-hmm.
and as soon as they kind of learn the neuroscience behind it and get that validation of like, you know, it's 2021, we should know all the things. Unfortunately, we don't know all the things,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of things that we do know, and when it comes to this kind of, hey, I don't have the motivation, once I start moving, hey, then I start to feel more motivated. Right, your movement system, right? There's acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, but that's the big thing that fires the muscles itself. But the motor system in total is driven upon dopamine, right? And dopamine is that whole reward, motivation, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see with individuals that once we start to get them moving, there's a part of your brainstem called the substantia nigra. Big fancy word for basically it's your dopamine factory. And so what happens is as you start to get moving, right, those factories start to kick up. And when you're non-motivated, and we see this a lot in like clinical depression, is they're literally not getting the dopamine from that substantia nigra going into the frontal lobe, right, where we live, our egos and everything. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have that drive. As soon as we start to get moving, right, we turn up the capacity from those factories, and now there's a little bit of extra overflow, right? There's a little interest, a little surplus going to those motivation centers. So then, it gets a little easier, right? And so absolutely lowering the barriers to entry, because most of the time it's, you know, if that pile of dishes is about a mile high, yeah, your procrastination is totally related to the size of the task, right? Yeah. I mean, when it comes to, hey, there's 3 dishes in the sink, I'll bust it out right now, right?
Yeah.
I know for myself, like, I'm currently writing a book, and I'm like a third of the way through it, and I'm on the nutrition chapter right now. And as we've kind of talked, like I can go on nutrition forever, and so it's this big kind of daunting task, and it's like, oh fuck, right? Versus going, okay, today I'm gonna write about trans fats. I'm just gonna write about trans fats, and there are certain nuances of that, and we can kind of get into that. But ultimately, hey, let's lower the barrier. You start there, and then you go, oh, you know what? I have this other thought about omega fats. Oh, and then let's talk about the influence of micronutrients. And now I've written so much more than just trans fats, where I start off with just akin to, hey, instead of just warming up, and again, what was the worst that happens? I actually finished the section on trans fats.
Exactly.
Right? And so having those little things to kind of get you going, and I think that's where, kind of back to the whole atomic habits thing, taking the habits that you already have, because we are creatures of habit. A habit is basically a neural pathway that has become so efficient that instead of buying in with $10 to get an action, right, I can put $1 in and get that action. So taking that efficiency and tacking something onto it is where we get all these great abilities to start to learn and grow. And so using those, like all of our sleep habits, all of our wake habits, those are amazing.
Yeah. And it's awesome because, they don't, that's what you're saying, they don't take any energy.
Yeah.
It's like I wake up, I start my coffee maker, I do yoga and mobility because that's what I do now. And it's like, and that's the funny thing on the same lines, and I know if people have heard me talk, they've heard me say this 1,000 times. I don't think there's been a single day that I've wanted to do yoga and mobility in the morning. But like looking at it now, there also hasn't been a single day where I was upset that I did it. And so just learning that over time, and it's like I've done it every single day for about 2 years now. With not a single day am I like, here we go. It's just like coffee's going, my rules, I don't get to have any until I've done this. And it's usually about 10 seconds into it.
Like, okay.
It's like I'm already just like, nice, and now this feels tight. Let's do these exercises and movements, and now this and this and this. So a lot of it is just, I think, building the, I guess, confidence or the ability or the skill to just follow through when you don't feel, because it's like we don't do a good job of being like, oh, that meeting later, of imagining what that experience is going to actually be like. We don't do a good job of getting that correct. And so when we think it's going to be something, the only thing we can really know is it's not that thing. And so a lot of times we work up how bad the dishes, we work these things up too much, or like how boring it's going to be to do these exercises. Like, it's not that bad. Just get it started, and you're going to think differently when you're doing it. When we're working with people to help change a lot of their lifestyle things and their food and how they eat, that's what holds people back a ton, is like, oh, I can't imagine not doing this. It's like, well, don't try, because you're going to get it wrong. Whatever you're imagining is completely wrong. And once it's just what you do, you don't even think about the other thing anymore. I haven't had sugar. I think this is another, I wish I had written start dates on all of these things, but I haven't had sugar in a couple years. And that doesn't mean, oh, I was at a restaurant and they had a honey glaze that I didn't know was going to be on there, and I ate that. But like, I haven't taken cake or cookies, something where I knew it had sugar and ate it in like 2 years. And the way I view it is completely different now. It just doesn't, but I know 2.5 years ago me wouldn't have believed me right now, because it's like there's no way he could have imagined that. And now it's like sugar has zero part in my life, no control over me. I don't sit there and just like, it's not like a willpower thing anymore. It's just like, I don't like how that makes me feel. It's in the moment great, and I remember how good it was in the moment, but 30 minutes later, the next day, what it does to this, it's like, I don't like that. And so I don't even look at it the same. But I never could have imagined that.
Yeah, well, and, there's two things that I'd love to jump off with that. There's such a shame. Like, we know all the things that are bad for us, and then we love to beat ourselves up because of it. And so with some of the nutrition stuff that I work with people, you know, there are cravings, and you can get into the whole science of why do you have cravings. Like, there are different mindsets on like micronutrient harvesting, right? Some people, they overindulge and gorge and all that kind of stuff because their body is going, okay, in that potato chip, let's just say there is 0.0001% of the magnesium, just because we've been talking about magnesium, in there. Okay, I need to eat like 1 million potato chips to get that magnesium. Let's go for it, right? Because, and then again, you have all the salt and all those things that are driving and inhibiting your satiety and all that kind of stuff. So the way that I like to kind of get people to do things like that is incorporate things that are positive within the negative. So like when it comes to the whole potato chip thing, because my girlfriend, love her, she still loves to do some snacking and that kind of stuff. What I'll do is go, okay, you can, sure, whatever, you buy it, I'm not going to buy it, because if it's in the house, then I end up eating it as well, right? I'll go, okay, it's going to stay in the pantry. I'm never going to be able to take it out of the pantry. If I want to eat it, I have to get up, walk over. I can grab one out of the bag, put it in my mouth. I have to walk out of the kitchen. Okay, if I want another, I have to walk back into the kitchen. So the calorie count, it's not over, you know, it's not a pure one-to-one like, oh, you know, I do 10 steps for every one chip or whatever, right? But at least I'm getting these movements in, because eventually I'm going to get tired of walking in and out of the kitchen.
Yeah, the economics of it doesn't make sense with your brain.
Yeah, it's just
so it's just like, this isn't worth it.
This is totally not worth it.
But you got to be good, and it sounds like you are, at creating rules for yourself when you're strong and fed, and this is how I want to live my life, and then following through in the moment, regardless of, because as soon as you have one, now you're playing the game of, do I follow the rule, do I not follow the rule? But if you're really good at following through on your rules, and that's just a skill, really, I don't want to work out, I'm going to warm up, I don't care how I feel, I'm warming up, and then following through on the rules is what really supercharges it.
And then the other thing that I want to talk about, kind of akin to your cutting out of sugar, it's so crazy how sensitized your body becomes to these kind of things, because my girlfriend, great baker, she does all that kind of stuff, and I try to keep all that stuff away. I never buy any of it. If it's around, you know, I'll take the smallest piece or something like that, and even then I probably won't eat all of it, because it is so intense and so powerful in the mouth, and then brain goes, oh my god, so much sugar, right? And if you constantly live in that space, there's no contrast of what does it feel like to be stimulated by XYZ thing versus the implications afterwards, right? And one of the big things with me is like alcohol. I've been going pretty sober, and I mean there are days where we're celebrating and doing that kind of stuff, and I'll have a beer or I'll have a cocktail or something like that. But it's crazy after, because I mean in undergrad and chiro school, right? In chiro school, work hard, play hard, right? You study for 10 hours, 12 hours a day, and that's all through the week, and then on the weekends, right, it's binging, all that kind of stuff. After, you know, these past couple of years, it's been okay, you know, let's cut down on that, and you know, there's certain reasonings for all that kind of stuff, but it's crazy how impactful those things can be, where now I'll have a beer, right? And I had, you know, just the other day we were celebrating starting Action Potential, but also my girlfriend got a kind of a promotion in some way, shape, or form at her practice, and so we had this, you know, aged sour beer, and it was delicious, and oh my god. And then probably 30 to 45 minutes afterwards, right, I'm already starting to get a little bit of a headache, right? And then the next day I'm feeling groggy, and I know, like, it's crazy that one glass of beer, and of course we can have the gluten conversation, we can have the alcohol conversation, all these kinds of things, but being able to have that contrast of what used to be totally normal, and your body can go through it, and sure, I'm aging and the liver decreases its capacity with age, but, and I'm not, I'm gonna say I'm not that old, so when it comes to this, breaking that cycle and getting away from that and going, hey, this is what it feels like to actually be performing at the level that I should and could be performing at, versus we know alcohol stays in the body for around 3 days, or the implications on performance are around 3 days. And so if you're having a drink every, even if it's just one or two, right?
Yeah.
Every 3 or 4 days, right? You're never getting that point and figuring out what that normal good spot actually feels like. So then you can go, when I have it, oh my God, I feel like shit.
Because you acclimate to what you think normal is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're always performing down here or feeling this way, that's normal. But once you remove yourself from it and you experience this from real food, sleep, reducing alcohol or removing alcohol, all these things, then when you have it, exactly what you're saying,
it's like, whoa.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, it's so obvious. I think another thing, and this, I don't know if this will ring true to you, but I know a big part of what got me to stop drinking, to stop doing sugar, just to really boost everything in my life as far as health goes, was becoming a small business owner. Because you don't get weekends. There's no weekends. It's every day, all day, it's looming. And for me, it was like it's like mental performance. It's like I didn't have, it's Saturday, but I don't have a Saturday that I don't want to like push my stuff forward. And if I'm hungover, if I'm sleepy, if I'm this, if I'm this, it's like I'm not working at what I know I can work at. And so for me, it's like I just want to be up here for all, like 100 reasons: health, performance in the gym, all of these things, happiness, blah blah blah. But also, it's just like to have that brain power. It's different brain power, and it's like it's so important for my job and my businesses that I have this brain power, and so I prioritize it. And it's really easy for me to be like, great, that ice cream would be fun for 15 minutes, but it's like I've experienced it so many times that messes my brain power up tomorrow, and I don't want to deal with that. It's like I got too much stuff to do.
Yeah, and if we're going back to the whole physical, chemical, emotional stressor, right? It's a massive mental and emotional stressor. So adding on the chemical stress of whether that's, the sugar from ice creams and all that kind of stuff, or the alcohol, or whatever substance you're using, right? And a lot of it is self-soothing, right? We are self-soothing animals. That's why we self-adjust. That's why we rub things out. That's why we ingest things, right? Getting to the point where it's almost the embrace the suck. Like, listen, just because I'm kicking the can down the road, or, taking from Peter to pay Paul kind of a thing, right? Knowing and kind of getting a mind frame around that absolutely plays into why I'm starting the path. Now, I'm not going to say that, I've been 12 years sober or anything like that. I mean, I still have days, and I think that's a bit of the youth, and, I'm trying to get around more individuals that have that same kind of mindset, because, still being younger, right, it's still popular to, hey, let's go out and, party and do all that kind of stuff, in which it's a fun time doing that, right? It's really great to, the unfortunate part about things like alcohol and weed and all those kind of things is it can drop the veil on people. They can feel more able to open themselves up and create a little bit more human connection, and going, oh, we connect on this issue, or we connect on that issue, or we can openly do things that maybe before we'd be a little more stuck up about, or something like that. But getting individuals that are of the mindset of like, hey man, how about instead of going out and partying, let's go for a bike ride, and
Me and you walk around the hike and bike trail.
Absolutely, right? And so doing things like that, where it's changing the social experiment or experience. It is an experiment, but the experience from the center point being something that is kind of a depressant, unless you're doing a stimulant kind of a thing, in which that's more coffee shops and whatnot. But the experience being around the substance or whatever, to making that focal point something that we know that we both want to experience and grow from. And whether that's a new culinary experience, hey, let's go try that Ethiopian place because we've never had that. Wow, it's so much different. Or let's go exercise, or let's go go to a comedy club or something like that. And some areas, some activities, again, kind of facilitate those substances and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, having that be the focal point instead of, oh, we're going to go and we're going to, have beer Olympics, or we're going to go do this, that, or the other. There's a real big push, I know, in my life, and hopefully with others, especially as things start to open up, to go, hey, and especially with how the mental health crisis of America and all that kind of stuff with COVID and everybody being shut in, not getting vitamin D exposure, not getting exercise, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully there's been kind of an awakening to, hey, let's really start to take care of ourselves, and if we can mitigate and reduce the amount of negative inputs or inputs that will decrease my ability to create a small business, which there are so many more new entrepreneurs and business people kind of coming out, be able to be there for my loved ones, be there to perform for myself. Hopefully there's more of a drive for people to start to grow that kind of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately the alcohol and all those things are becoming a little more subsidized, and they're it is culturally acceptable to kind of have a drink almost every night. You can have a glass of wine, do this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
And it's a shroud that you never know how to get out of it until you get out of it and you look from afar and you go,
yeah.
Wow.
I think there's a lot, and it's like people can choose to do whatever they want, but I think there's a lot that can come from experimenting with removing it for a little bit, just to change your perspective on it. But I completely agree, and I think something else that helped me stop drinking so much is realizing like what I actually enjoy with people, and it's why we're doing this right now. It's like I really enjoy like talking to people, no phones, no TV on, hike and bike trails. Like the only thing we were doing, it's like, you're stuck with me. Let's talk.
Yeah.
And I feel like alcohol can be something that gets in the way of deep conversations.
True.
Which is another thing that makes me shy away from it a little bit more, because it's like, look, if I'm hanging out with you, it's like I really like deep conversations, because it's like I've been exposed just through this to 900 new ideas, and it's like, and I'm like excited about hearing these things. And if we were just drinking on this podcast, it's like I wouldn't have gotten there.
We probably talk about some pop culture, like, oh, you see the new Avenger movie?
Exactly.
Which, I mean, Avenger movies are great. Love them. But you're
it's the superficial conversations that drive me crazy. And so then if I'm in a situation where it's like, well, the only type of conversation I can have is superficial, and now it's either go home, be extremely bored, or get wasted. It's just like, man, I don't like any of these options.
Those are terrible options.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so kind of dialing back when it comes to, starting a small business. Yeah, there are bits where, for me, being able to get away from it's a double-edged sword, because of my mindset, my lateral thinking, because I'm a new business owner, there's a lot of self-doubt, there's imposter syndrome, all those kind of things. Those kinds of substances definitely can drown that out a little bit, but it literally is drowning, right? It's a little piece of you is dying. There's a reason why those words are being said, and it's not for you to go, oh, I need to not listen to them. You have imposter syndrome because you want something that somebody else has, and what you do is you have to become somebody that you've never been before to get those things.
Yeah, you got to do things out of your comfort zone.
Exactly.
And you should be reaching for things that you can't, if you could currently do it, then that's not building something new.
Exactly.
So yeah, imposter syndrome makes perfect sense. You haven't done it yet. But you should always be trying to do things you haven't done yet.
Yeah, and that's the beauty, I think, about, CrossFit in general, is it's that type of workout where bodybuilding and kind of the normal gym style workouts and even aerobic exercise can become very monotonous, where it's like, I go for my X mile run. Like my grandfather, he's doing amazing. He takes care of himself. He's in his 60s, but he's got the mind and the endurance of a 40-year-old. He's doing awesome, but he hits the same amount of miles on his walk every single day. And I try to get across to him, hey, listen, especially with aerobic exercise, your body becomes efficient, right? So the amount of calories, the amount of input that your body had when you first started walking those 5 miles was here, right? But now over time, right, your metabolic system, your neurological system has gotten more efficient at, okay, how's your heel strike? How can we become this super efficient machine? That drops down. So either you need to increase your input, or because he's trying to lose weight, you have to decrease calories, right? And we do know with like aerobic exercise, right, you lose kind of a 50-50 on muscle, lean muscle tissue and adipose tissue, that fat. So you've dropped that down, and so as you drop your calories now, right, if you need to do more, you're losing this same percentage of lean muscle tissue and fat. Now you're losing the thing that plays one of the biggest parts to your total calorie burning system, which is your resting metabolic rate, which is your muscle, right? So it turns into this thing where, hey, you need to be growing, and I've been trying to push on him more resistance style training and trying to find a good CrossFit gym.
And it's one of the factors of how long you can live a happy, healthy life is muscle mass, but those are just specific things that they've done research on, but it's that functionality and the muscle mass and bone density and all these other things are just so important, especially as you start aging 80s, 90s, 100. Like, it's just so key. And so the cardio is great for your heart. It's great for so many things, but having the additional things that will, grow and keep muscle mass and these things are also, and range of motion. Let's make sure you're able to pick things up and to do things and to carry grocery bags up and down stairs and keep these things going for as long as possible. Which is so important to also add in there.
And so that's where, again, kind of the growth in going, oh, I'm terrible at doing, like, I know myself, double unders. Oh my God. If I can land 10 double unders in a row, that's, I'm praising Jesus, something like that. But so taking the time and going, hey, I can't do that, instead of going, well, I'm just going to do single unders forever, right? That competitive aspect of me is going, hey, they can do 40 double unders in, no time, and I'm over here hitting my single unders relatively quickly, but again, it's still, you're almost 2/3 slower, you know what I mean? It's really slowing you down. So taking that time and growing and going, hey, I am this person. I am, whether I'm the CrossFit athlete, I am the endurance athlete, I am the business owner, right? Accepting and creating that vision for yourself and going, hey, even though it's uncomfortable, I'm going to sit down and do it. I'm going to get good at double unders. Hey, I'm going to sit down, and even though it scares the bejesus out of me and I hate doing it, I'm going to go do this drop-in class, talk to the owner, zhuzh him up and go, hey, I'm here to provide value, do something like that, right? And have these areas of growth. And that's where the double-edged sword of these substances can kind of calm you down, but again, right, it creates that creature of habit of, okay, I'm like with myself, I know, because I grew up in Washington State, chiropractic school in Portland, Oregon, and then did my first couple of years in Denver, Colorado. So marijuana has been legalized in all of those states, and so I'm kind of a neat freak as well. So I would have a little bit of weed, and then I would do the weed, right? Smoke some marijuana, and then I would clean, because I can actually focus on my biomechanics and whatnot, which I was able to translate to other people, like some of the service workers that I operate a vacuum all day. Okay, let's talk about how you actually do that, because I would do that. But then once you're in a place where, hey, every minute of every day can be counting towards something, and the clock is counting it against you because you have bills to pay. It's not a W-2, right? It's not a 9-to-5 that you can just show up, and whether you do 100% of your all or 20% of your all, you're getting paid the exact same thing, right? It's your business, it's your ride or die. So you have every minute of every day that you need to hammer in on. That creature of habit of, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this to kind of calm myself down. Well, normally I clean when I do this, so let me do this. I may have cleaned 3 days ago, so there's not going to be that much, but again, it turns into what is easy versus what is hard. One of our things at Action Potentials is we want to live the hard, easy life, not the easy, hard life, right? Where it's put the hard things first so that life then becomes easy versus putting the easy life first and then when something comes up, life is so hard.
And I think when you consistently do the hard things, doing hard things becomes easier. And just getting them started and all those things just becomes easier to do. And then keeping with the substances, it's like weed, you can't get into deep sleep. Alcohol, until all the alcohol has been metabolized, you can't get into REM sleep. That's why a lot of people who use weed or alcohol because it lets them fall asleep, it's like, yeah, you can fall asleep, but you can't get quality sleep. And it's a lot of people who drink wake up with very vivid dreams because they haven't been able to get REM sleep all night. Finally, the alcohol is metabolized, so now their body's like, REM sleep, we got to get it in. And then you wake up. And
it's right there.
Exactly. So a lot of these things, Ambien, a lot of things that like put you to sleep, or people are like, oh, I can have caffeine and fall right to sleep. It's like, yeah, so that's kind of like anesthesia. It's like you're not sleeping. You're unconscious, but it's like you're not hitting the phases of sleep. And if every phase wasn't extremely important, there's no reason your body would do it. It would be the dumbest thing ever your body could possibly do is go into a certain phase of sleep if it was not important.
Let's just do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, your body's smart there. I forget the podcast I was listening to, but it was basically like, if you think you can biohack your body to do XYZ thing, like, you're kidding yourself. Like, sure, there are certain nutrients that you can take and change your physiological state or change the kind of basis that you're in, whether we're over supplementing with like ketones because I want to go into ketosis, or I'm taking CoQ10 to supplement my mitochondrial health and put myself in a good place there, or the substances or whatever, right? Like, sure, you are setting yourself up for that specific point in time, but everything affects everything. It's going to come back around some way, shape, or form. So if I'm taking sleep pills, or my favorite is the people that go melatonin. Oh, it's natural. Your body naturally produces melatonin. It's like, yeah, but at the same time, as soon as we start to have these exogenous things, like that's the big thing now is like hormone replacement therapy and testosterone replacement therapy, which there is a time and a place for that once your body starts to slump down. And I know that there's plenty of individuals that I know and trust their advice medically. They're planning on doing TRT and hormone replacement therapy.
But it should be after the lifestyle things are in place. Because if your problem is you're eating too much of this crap, or you're not sleeping, or you're exercising way too much, and that's why your testosterone is tanked. You don't supplement. It's like you fix the thing.
Fix the problem.
And the melatonin thing, that's an interesting one too. And I forget what hormone it is. I think it's estrogen. But too much melatonin, and the supplements you get can be like plus or minus something ridiculous, like 500%. Like, just crazy how far off what you think you're taking can actually be. But too much, I think it's estrogen, I forget, has so many other negative effects because like you can have too much melatonin, so supplementing it can be scary on those lines of everything's got trade-offs here.
And melatonin influences your immune system. They actually did a great study looking at melatonin concentrations and COVID outcomes, right? So if you're not getting the proper sleep, or you're constantly caffeinating, you're not getting the appropriate lighting throughout your day, right? You're not getting the good red light, you're getting too much blue light, that all messes it up. There's so many things that can kind of influence this total body restorative, right? You need to have the ebbs and flows of training enough, right? We know that, like, back to the TRT thing, right? Big, large system movements, things like the deadlift, leg presses, the Olympic style lifting with these powerful, big, multi joint segmented movements stimulate the production of things like growth hormone and testosterone and estrogen, depending on the sex and whatnot. And if you're not doing that, absolutely, there's so many overweight middle-aged men that are, you know, losing their hair, and they're like, well, I'm gonna go on testosterone. That'll change it. And sure, it changes it for that honeymoon phase because your body goes, oh my God, there's testosterone around. But then you get receptor sensitivity issues, just like with insulin sensitivity, right? Once I like to akin to it as like pizza man comes to the door, right? If one pizza man comes to the door and your receptors are nice and sensitive, knocks on it, opens the door, here's your pizza kind of a thing. But eventually, right, if this happens over and over and more pizza guys are coming, you're like, okay, I'm not going to open the door, and then you're just hearing so much knocking because there's a bunch of pizza guys knocking because there's so much of this hormone around, right? So it's going, whoa, I'm gonna sensitize myself or desensitize myself. And so then it finally opens it up, chemicals rush in, whether that's insulin or testosterone or anything like that, and that's where we start to run into all these issues, and then you become to the point where you're taking this medication to fight that medication side effect that fights that medication side effect, and all of it could be mitigated if we work on the fundamentals, right? The day one fundamentals of, are you exercising with enough intensity but with enough rest? Are we getting good nutrition, hydration? Are we getting good sleep? Do we have good people around us? Do we have a goal in our life? You know, all those kind of things that are the baselines to really good health. You know, if you don't have those, you know, sure, Western medicine will give you a potion and a pill for everything, but at the same time, like, you're going to end up in the exact same spot in almost probably a worse health situation and hundreds of $1,000s in debt because you're having to take all these things all the time and go to the hospital and go to the doctor's office and all that kind of stuff. So ultimately, yeah, I mean, if you can do it yourself, one thing that I like to say with melatonin, it's a little bit of kind of like the food that has the most melatonin out of all the foods are pistachios, right? Everybody loves pistachios. I usually recommend people, hey, you know, the 3 to 4 hours before bed, just have a handful of pistachios. One, you're getting the good fats to kind of calm you down. They taste delicious, but they have the most melatonin by and large and far in front of all the others. It's like, you know, a handful has like 2 milligrams or something like that, which is kind of right around where a supplement would be, but you're also getting
where you think a supplement would be.
Where you think a supplement would be, absolutely.
Because I think what I heard is, it's upwards of, you think it's 2, I don't know what the numbers are again, but like, it might be 10 or 15, like, insanely off.
Yeah. Well, and that's unfortunately the whole supplement industry in general, that there are no regulations on supplements versus medication. There are supplements by and large, and it's interesting that there are actually some supplements that go from the supplement category and get changed into drugs based off of their effectiveness. N-acetylcysteine was a massively popular supplement. It's kind of a vasodilator. It's a cofactor that's used in a bunch of different processes. But it was a supplement, and there were clinics that used to actually do like infusions of NAC that, you know, would have wildly massive implications on your immune system and your vascular system and all that kind of stuff. Which is that the stuff that really hurts when it goes in? So you got to drip it slowly. It shouldn't hurt as in coming in, but you get this flush, right? So people take like an hour to inject it. Exactly. And then some people who build up a tolerance, they go like 10 minutes and it's like crazy. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. And so the FDA actually changed it where now it's no longer a supplement and you have to have a medical license to do it, which, to be fair, yes, if it's something that can give you such a flush, maybe we shouldn't allow people to just take it and fucking throw it right into their system right away. But there are plenty of supplements that are just garbage, right? Because it's totally warranted. What's on the label's not what's in the box. Yeah, and that's why whenever I do supplements, I try to work with companies that are practitioner only, right? And you have to be working with a functional medicine practitioner or somebody that has a medical license to get, and not because, these are better, but realistically, you're paying for products that you know are in there, that are third-party tested, that are up to specific standards. Because most of the stuff that you find at GNC, no offense GNC, are just filler garbage, right? That are trying to make the most profit for this small amount of time, people burn through it because it's the new thing out there, and they go, I don't really feel any different. I'm gonna switch brands.
Yeah.
Right? And then it's just the.
And even if they found the perfect ones, we're looking at 1%, where it's like everything else you listed. These are huge 5, 20, 30% gains in just how happy your life is with sleep, nutrition, all those things. So I think because we have to wrap it up, I think that's a really good place to wrap it up.
Okay.
It's just kind of leaving it at just really, it's like you can't beat that dead horse enough on you've got to take ownership of yourself. There's no magic pill out there. And when you work with people like you, it's so key that you're there to manipulate, you're there to help, to do the things that need to happen, but you're also there to educate. But it's on the person and everywhere. It's on the person to accept the reality of like what this life is, and there's no magic pills. And someone trying to sell you a magic pill, here's the back crack, see you later. It's like, or the coach is like, oh, you just power lift. We're going to do starting strength and fat loss and all these things. It's like, you just got to look at those people. It's like, it's that holistic, you can't get away from it.
Everything affects everything.
Yeah, and we learn more and more as we go, but awesome.
Yeah.
So how can people find you?
So online, it's actionpotentialcenter.com is the website. Of course, we have our YouTube channel, Facebook, all the things. We're not really big on Twitter just because, unfortunately, Twitter is kind of a cesspool
of
all of its things, and good on them. But yeah, Facebook, Instagram. Instagram is going to be Action Potential Center. LinkedIn, Action Potential Center. Facebook, Action Potential Center. All those.
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, dude.
Thank you.